Rachel Monroe had everything money could buy: a billion-dollar tech empire, a penthouse that touched the Los Angeles sky, and a face that graced magazine covers worldwide. But every night at 2 a.m., she locked herself in her bathroom and slowly killed herself with something no amount of wealth could fix. The only person who knew was a man she'd never truly seen: Daniel Brooks, the midnight janitor who cleaned up the pieces of her carefully constructed lie. Tonight, that lie would shatter, and the truth would either save her or destroy everything she'd ever built. If you're ready to discover how far one woman will fall before she finds the courage to rise, stay with me until the end. And don't forget to hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The first time Daniel Brooks noticed something was wrong with Rachel Monroe, it was 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in March, and he was emptying her bathroom trash. He'd been cleaning her penthouse every weeknight for 3 months, arriving at midnight when she was presumably asleep, leaving before dawn when the city below still dreamed in darkness. In that time, he'd learned the silent language of her space, where she left her coffee cups, which rooms she actually used, the particular way she folded her throw blankets on the sofa. Daniel had cleaned enough homes of the wealthy to know that empty penthouses told stories their owners never meant to share. But Rachel Monroe's story was beginning to trouble him. The bathroom trash shouldn't have meant anything: just crumpled tissues, cotton pads stained with makeup remover, the usual debris of a woman's nightly routine. Except tonight, beneath the tissues, Daniel's gloved hand brushed against something that made him pause: a small glass pipe, still warm. He pulled his hand back as if burned. For a long moment, he stood there in the pristine marble bathroom, the ventilation fan humming its mechanical lullaby, while his mind worked through the implications. The pipe was delicate, expensive-looking, the kind of paraphernalia that cost more than his weekly paycheck. And it wasn't old. The residue inside still glistened slightly under the recessed lighting. Daniel carefully extracted the pipe with a tissue, wrapped it, and placed it at the bottom of the trash bag. Then he cleaned the rest of the bathroom with mechanical precision, trying to unknow what he now knew. He'd been a janitor for 5 years, ever since Maya was born. Before that, he'd had a different life, one with a corner office and a title that came with respect. But when his wife died in childbirth, and he was suddenly alone with a newborn daughter, the 80-hour work weeks of corporate architecture had become impossible. So he'd walked away from the drafting tables and the client meetings, taken a night shift with a cleaning company, and rebuilt his life around the only thing that mattered: being there when Maya woke up each morning. The wealthy people whose homes he cleaned at night existed in a different universe from the modest apartment where he and Maya ate breakfast together each dawn. He'd learned not to judge their excesses, their waste, their peculiar habits. He cleaned their spaces, took his paycheck, and maintained the invisible boundary between their world and his. But this felt different. Daniel finished the bathroom and moved through the rest of the penthouse with quiet efficiency. The living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city of lights. The kitchen that looked like it had never been used for actual cooking. The guest rooms that remained perpetually pristine. And finally, the master bedroom, where he never entered unless the door was open. His own rule, a boundary of respect. Tonight, the door was open. He'd never seen her bedroom before. 3 months of cleaning this penthouse, and Rachel Monroe had never left that door ajar. The sight made him hesitate at the threshold, uncertain whether the open door was invitation or oversight. The room was darker than the rest of the apartment, heavy blackout curtains blocking the city lights. But Daniel could make out the shape of the massive bed, the figure beneath the covers so still it might have been a sculpture. He listened for the sound of breathing and heard nothing. His hand found the doorframe, steadying himself against a sudden spike of concern. Was she breathing? Should he check? What were the protocols when you found your employer potentially not breathing in their own bedroom at 3 in the morning? Then he heard it, a soft, wet cough, quickly muffled. The figure in the bed shifted slightly. Daniel stepped back from the doorway, relief and unease warring in his chest. She was awake, or at least alive. He'd clean the hallway instead, skip the bedroom tonight. But as he turned away, a voice emerged from the darkness, rough, strained, nothing like the polished tones he'd heard in the brief interactions they'd had. "You can clean it." Daniel froze. In 3 months, they'd exchanged perhaps a dozen words, all of them transactional. Good evening, Mr. Brooks. Thank you for your work. Brief professional acknowledgments that maintained the employer-employee distance. She'd never spoken to him in the middle of the night, never acknowledged his presence when she was supposedly sleeping. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "the bedroom. You can clean it." Another cough, this one longer, more painful sounding. "I'm awake." Daniel stood in the doorway, uncertain. The vacuum cleaner and cleaning supplies suddenly felt absurd in his hands, props in a scene that had shifted into something else entirely. "I can come back another night," he offered, "if you're not feeling well." A sound emerged from the darkness that might have been a laugh or might have been something breaking. "I'm never feeling well. Come in or don't, I don't care." The words carried a weight that made Daniel's chest tighten with recognition. He'd heard that particular shade of despair before, in his own voice, in the months after Sarah died, when Maya was screaming with colic and he was functioning on 90 minutes of sleep, and the future looked like an endless tunnel with no light at the end. He'd heard it, and he'd survived it, and he recognized it now in the voice of a woman who had everything money could buy. Daniel set down the vacuum and stepped into the room, moving quietly to the windows. "I'll just empty the trash and dust the surfaces," he said, keeping his voice low and professional. "Won't take long." He heard the sheets rustle as she shifted. In the dim light filtering through the curtains, he could barely make out her profile against the pillows. A tumble of dark hair, the outline of shoulders that seemed too thin beneath the expensive bedding. "Do you ever wonder," Rachel Monroe said to the ceiling, "what it's like to be dying and have everyone tell you you're fine?" Daniel's hand stilled on the trash bin. This wasn't a conversation he should be having. This was crossing every line of professional distance, venturing into territory where a night janitor had no business. But something in her voice, that raw, honest desperation, caught him and held him there. "I think," he said carefully, "that sometimes the worst kind of dying is the kind nobody else can see." The silence that followed felt heavy with unsaid things. Daniel emptied the trash, another pipe, he noticed, not even hidden this time, and moved to dust the surfaces. The nightstand held a collection that told its own story: a water bottle, opened and barely touched, a plate with dried food she'd apparently been unable to eat, an array of prescription bottles, all from different doctors, none of them seeming to provide whatever relief she was seeking. "You have a daughter," Rachel said suddenly. Daniel looked up, surprised. "Yes, ma'am. Maya, she's 5. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "How did you—" "I pay attention." Rachel's voice held a ghost of amusement. "You have her drawing on your phone background. And sometimes your shirt smells like the strawberry shampoo kids use. And once, you answered your phone in the hallway. I wasn't asleep. And I heard you telling her a bedtime story about a princess and a dragon." But Daniel stood motionless, recalibrating his understanding of these past 3 months. He'd assumed she slept through his presence, that he was essentially invisible to her. But she'd been listening, noticing, paying attention to details about him while he cleaned around the edges of her life. "I didn't mean to disturb you," he said. "The phone call—" "You didn't disturb me." She coughed again, a sound that seemed to come from deep in her chest. "You made me remember what it's like when someone actually cares if you're still breathing." The words hung in the air between them, too honest for the formal distance they'd maintained. Daniel should have made some polite response and continued cleaning. Should have finished quickly and left her alone with whatever demons she was fighting in the dark. Instead, he heard himself say, "Are you eating?" "Excuse me?" "The food on your nightstand. It's been there for 2 days. The fruit in your kitchen is rotting. I've been cleaning your coffee cups, but there's never any evidence you've had a real meal." Silence. Then, "Are you monitoring my eating habits, Mr. Brooks?" "I'm noticing that you're not eating, Ms. Monroe. There's a difference." "And why would my janitor care if I eat?" The word janitor carried a slight emphasis, not quite an insult, but a reminder of the hierarchy between them. Daniel felt it land, but didn't flinch. He'd left his ego behind when he'd left his career, traded it for something more valuable, time with his daughter, and enough sleep to be present for her. "Because," he said quietly, "someone should care. And right now, I'm the only one here." He heard her breath catch. Not a cough this time, but something else. A sound like she'd been struck by an unexpected truth. "You should go," Rachel said finally, but her voice had lost its edge. I'm keeping you from your work. Daniel nodded, though she probably couldn't see the gesture in the darkness. He gathered his supplies and moved toward the door, then paused at the threshold. Miss Monroe? Yes? The windows in your bedroom. They've been open every night this week, even though it's been cold. And your bathroom fan runs for hours after you've gone to bed, and there's a smell in here that the air fresheners aren't quite covering. The silence that followed was different from before. Tense, frightened, caught. I don't know what you're implying, Rachel said, but her voice shook. I'm not implying anything. I'm just saying that if you needed someone to make sure the smoke detectors weren't going to pick up anything, I could check them. Make sure they're functioning properly. Or not, depending on what you needed. It was as close as he could come to acknowledging what he'd found without directly confronting her. A lifeline, offered sideways, that she could accept or refuse. Why would you do that? Rachel's whisper barely reached him across the dark room. Daniel thought of Maya, of the nights after Sarah died when he'd sat in his daughter's nursery and wondered if he had the strength to keep going. He thought of the people who'd helped him then, his neighbor who brought casseroles, the nurse at the pediatrician's office who taught him how to soothe a colicky baby, the other night shift workers who'd shared their coffee and their stories and their silent understanding that sometimes survival came 1 hour at a time. Because, he said, someone should care. And right now, I'm the only one here. He left before she could respond, closing the door quietly behind him. The next night, Daniel arrived at midnight to find the penthouse dark, except for a single light in the kitchen. Rachel Monroe sat at the marble island, still dressed in what looked like the same clothes from the previous night, expensive loungewear that hung loose on her thin frame. She had a laptop open in front of her, the screen's glow illuminating the sharp angles of her face. When Daniel entered through the service entrance, she looked up but didn't seem surprised to see him. "Mr. Brooks," she said. Her voice was hoarse, strained. "I wasn't sure you'd come back." Daniel set down his equipment, studying her in the better light. She looked worse than he'd imagined. Dark circles under eyes that were too bright, skin with an unhealthy pallor beneath the expensive self-care. Her hands trembled slightly as they rested on the keyboard. "This is my job," he said simply. "I come every night." "Even after what you found yesterday?" So they were going to talk about it directly. Daniel appreciated the honesty, even as it complicated everything. "Especially after what I found yesterday." Rachel's laugh was bitter. "Most people would have reported me, or quit, or tried to blackmail me. Do you know what the tabloids would pay for proof that tech mogul Rachel Monroe is a drug addict?" The words hung in the air, stark and unvarnished. Daniel heard the defensive anger beneath them, the expectation of judgment. "I'm not most people," he said, "and I'm not interested in your money or your reputation." "Then what are you interested in, Mr. Brooks? Why are you here, really?" Daniel moved to the sink, filling a glass with water, and set it in front of her. She stared at it like it was a foreign object. "I'm interested in making sure you don't die in this penthouse while I'm vacuuming your living room," he said. "Beyond that, what you do with your life is your business. But if you're going to die, I'd prefer not to be the one who finds you." The bluntness made Rachel flinch. "How considerate of you." "I'm being serious, Miss Monroe. I've cleaned enough wealthy people's homes to recognize the signs. The isolation, the erratic hours, the way you're burning through doctors trying to find one who'll tell you what you want to hear instead of what you need to hear. And what do I need to hear, according to my janitor?" The edge was back in her voice, sharp with defensive pride. Daniel met her eyes steadily. "That you're not fine. That whatever you're using isn't medicine, it's poison. That the mystery illness you think you have is called addiction, and it's killing you slowly while everyone else talks about your quarterly earnings and your brilliant business strategies." Rachel's face had gone white. "You don't know anything about me. I know you're alone up here every night. I know you're not eating, not sleeping, not living, just surviving from one hit to the next. I know you've convinced yourself that you're in control, that you can stop whenever you want, that this is just something you do to manage the stress of running a tech empire. Stop," her voice cracked. "Just stop." "I know," Daniel continued gently, "that you're terrified, that every morning you wake up promising yourself today will be different, and every night you break that promise. that you're ashamed and isolated and so tired of pretending to be okay that you can barely remember what okay felt like. Rachel's hands had come up to cover her face. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and wounded. Daniel stood awkwardly a few feet away, unsure whether to leave her alone with her breakdown or stay as a witness to her pain. He stayed. After several long minutes, Rachel lowered her hands. Her face was blotchy with tears, her carefully maintained appearance completely shattered. She looked younger somehow, more human, less like the polished executive whose picture graced business magazines. "How did you know?" she whispered. "My wife died 5 years ago," Daniel said. "After the funeral, I spent 2 months trying to take care of a newborn while functioning on prescription painkillers and whatever else I could get my hands on. I told myself I needed them to sleep, to cope, to function. Really, I was just trying to feel nothing." Rachel looked up at him, her eyes widening. "What happened?" "I woke up one morning and couldn't remember if I'd fed Maya during the night. She was crying, and I couldn't remember the last time I'd changed her diaper. And I realized that if I kept going, I was going to kill her through neglect, and myself through intention." He paused, the memory still painful even after 5 years. "So I flushed everything down the toilet and checked myself into an outpatient program. Worst 3 months of my life. But I survived them." "I can't do that," Rachel said immediately. "I can't check into anywhere. Do you know what would happen to my company if word got out? The stock would crash, the board would vote me out. Everything I've built would be destroyed." "So you'd rather die quietly than risk your reputation?" "It's not about reputation." She stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "It's about the thousands of people who work for me, the investors who trusted me with their money, the products we're developing that could change the industry. I can't just walk away because I have a problem." "You can't run a company if you're dead," Daniel pointed out. Rachel's laugh was sharp. "You'd be surprised what you can do when you're dying, Mr. Brooks. I've closed billion-dollar deals while I could barely stand. I've given keynote speeches to thousands of people while feeling like my heart was going to explode. I've built an empire while slowly destroying myself, and nobody noticed because they were too busy congratulating me on my success." The bitterness in her voice was corrosive. Daniel heard the anger beneath it, not at him, but at a world that had celebrated her achievements while missing her suffering. "They noticed," he said quietly. "They just didn't know what they were seeing." Rachel turned from the window, her expression haunted. "What do you mean?" "Your assistant schedules your important meetings for late afternoon, never mornings. Your driver always has water and mints ready when he picks you up. Your doctor, the one whose number is on all those prescription bottles, he writes you prescriptions without actually treating anything. They all see it, Miss Monroe. They're just choosing to look away because acknowledging it would be uncomfortable." The truth of it seemed to hit Rachel like a physical blow. She sank back onto the stool, her face crumbling again. "God, I'm so tired." "I know." "No, I mean, I'm tired of being tired. I'm tired of waking up every morning hating myself. I'm tired of promising I'll stop and then not stopping. I'm tired of being alone with this thing that's eating me alive." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I'm tired of being scared every time my heart races that this is it. This is the time I've finally gone too far." Daniel pulled out the stool next to her and sat down, maintaining a careful distance but offering his presence. "How long has it been?" 2 years, started with prescription stimulants to keep up with the work schedule. Then I found something that worked better, faster. And for a while it was amazing. I could work 20-hour days, needed almost no sleep, felt like I could do anything." She laughed without humor. "Turns out you can do anything, right up until the moment you can't do anything at all." "Have you tried to stop?" "Dozens of times. The longest I made it was 5 days. The withdrawal was—" She stopped, shuddering. "I can't go through that again. I can't function like that. I have responsibilities." "So you're going to keep using until it kills you?" Rachel met his eyes, and in them, Daniel saw the truth she hadn't been able to voice. That part of her was already hoping it would kill her. That death had started to look like relief from the endless cycle of shame and dependence. "I don't know how to stop," she said finally. "I don't know how to be the person who needs help." Rachel Monroe doesn't need help. Rachel Monroe has everything under control. Rachel Monroe is dying, Daniel finished. Rachel Monroe is dying, and everyone around her is pretending not to notice because it's easier than dealing with the truth. The silence that followed felt like something settling, a truth acknowledged, a pretense dropped. Rachel sat with her head in her hands, breathing slowly, as if the conversation had exhausted her completely. "What do I do?" she whispered. Daniel wished he had a simple answer. He wished he could tell her there was an easy path, a quick solution, a way to fix this without pain or risk or complete upheaval of her life. But he'd lived through his own version of this nightmare, and he knew better. "You survive the next hour," he said. "Then the hour after that. You tell someone the truth. Really tell them, not the polished version where you're handling it. You accept that you can't do this alone, that needing help doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." "I can't tell anyone," Rachel said desperately. "You don't understand the world I live in. Weakness is blood in the water. Vulnerability is career suicide." "Then you're going to die, Ms. Monroe. Maybe not tonight, maybe not next week, but eventually this is going to kill you. And when it does, all those people you're protecting, your employees, your investors, your company, they're going to be left dealing with the wreckage anyway." Rachel was crying again, silent tears streaming down her face. "I'm so scared." "I know. Being scared is the first step to being brave enough to survive this." They sat there for a long time, the city glittering through the windows, the penthouse silent except for the hum of expensive appliances. Daniel thought about leaving, about maintaining the professional distance that had already been completely shattered. But something kept him there. Maybe recognition, maybe compassion, maybe just the memory of his own dark nights when someone's presence had been the only thing keeping him tethered to life. Finally, Rachel stood. She moved unsteadily to the counter, opened a drawer, and pulled out a small wooden box. Daniel recognized what it was before she opened it, a stash box, expensive and discreet. She carried it to the kitchen trash can, hesitated for a long moment, then dumped the contents. Glass pipes, small bags, the paraphernalia of her secret life. It all tumbled into the trash with a series of soft clinks. Rachel stood staring at it, her hands gripping the counter so hard her knuckles were white. "This doesn't mean anything," she said, but her voice shook. "I've done this before. Thrown it all away, promised myself I'm done. And then 3 days later, I'm making phone calls, finding new sources." "So this time, don't do it alone," Daniel said. "This time, let someone help you." "Who? You?" There was no mockery in the question, just genuine confusion. "You're my janitor. You have your own life, your own daughter. You don't owe me anything." "I'm not doing this because I owe you something," Daniel said. "I'm doing this because 5 years ago I needed someone to care if I lived or died. And someone did, and that made all the difference." Rachel turned to face him, and for the first time since he'd started working there, Daniel saw her clearly. Not as the brilliant tech mogul, not as the mysterious employer, but as a woman fighting a battle she'd been losing for 2 years, finally desperate enough to ask for help from the only person who'd noticed she was drowning. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "Neither do I," Daniel admitted, "but we can figure it out together, 1 hour at a time." The first hour was the hardest. Rachel paced the penthouse like a caged animal, her body already responding to the absence of the drugs she'd dumped. She tried to work, to distract herself with emails and reports, but her hands shook too badly to type. She tried to watch television but couldn't focus. Finally, she ended up curled in a chair by the window, staring out at the city she'd conquered while feeling like she was coming apart from the inside. Daniel stayed cleaning quietly, maintaining a presence that was unobtrusive but steady. When Rachel's pacing became frantic, he suggested she sit down. When her breathing grew ragged with panic, he reminded her to breathe slowly. When she reached for her phone, clearly thinking about calling her source, he didn't stop her, just asked if she was sure that's what she wanted to do. She put the phone down. By the time the sun started to rise, painting the Los Angeles skyline in shades of pink and gold, Rachel had survived 6 hours without using. 6 hours of discomfort, anxiety, and physical cravings that made her feel like her skin was trying to crawl off her body. 6 hours that felt like 6 years. "I should let you go," she said as Daniel prepared to leave. "You need to get home to Maya." "I do," Daniel acknowledged, "but I'll be back tonight." "What if I don't make it until tonight?" The question was raw with fear. What if I can't do this alone during the day? Daniel pulled out his phone and handed it to her. Put your number in. If you need to talk to someone, call me. I might not be able to answer immediately, but I'll call you back. Rachel stared at the phone like it was a lifeline, which Daniel supposed it was. She entered her number with shaking hands and gave it back to him. Why are you doing this? She asked again. Daniel thought about his answer carefully. Because I've been where you are. Because I know what it's like to need someone to believe you can survive when you've stopped believing it yourself. And because, he paused, then continued honestly, because my daughter deserves to grow up in a world where people help each other, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Rachel's eyes filled with tears again. I'll try not to call. Call if you need to. That's what it's there for. He left as the sun was fully rising, driving through early morning traffic to his modest apartment where Maya would be waking up soon, ready for breakfast and cartoons and the uncomplicated joy of being 5 years old. As he drove, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Thank you for not walking away. Daniel saved the number under Rachel Monroe and sent back a simple reply. You survived the first night. That's what matters. The second night, Daniel arrived to find Rachel looking worse than before. She'd clearly been awake all day, fighting through what she later described as the longest 16 hours of my life. Her skin was clammy, her pupils dilated, and she couldn't stop moving, fidgeting, pacing, unable to find any position that felt comfortable. This is worse than I remembered, she said as he entered. God, why is it so much worse? Because you're actually feeling everything you've been numbing for 2 years, Daniel said, setting down his cleaning supplies. Your body and brain are trying to figure out how to function without the chemicals you've been giving them. I hate this. I hate feeling like this. Rachel wrapped her arms around herself. Tell me it gets better. It does, but not for a while. She laughed bitterly. You're terrible at pep talks. I'm not here to give you pep talks. I'm here to tell you the truth. This is going to be hell for a while, and then it's going to be hard for a while after that, and then it's going to get easier. But you have to survive the hell first. Rachel sank onto the sofa, her whole body trembling. I called my source today, 3 times, hung up before they answered, but I called. Did you want me to lie and say that's okay? No. She looked up at him, her expression miserable. I wanted you to tell me I'm doing terrible, so at least my expectations match reality. You're doing terrible, Daniel said. And you survived another day anyway. That's not nothing. The third night brought worse symptoms, nausea, muscle aches, insomnia that left Rachel pacing until dawn. Daniel stayed later than usual until 3 a.m., just being present while she suffered through what she called the longest night of my life, and I've had 2 years of long nights. The fourth night, Rachel finally slept, a few hours of fitful rest that left her looking slightly more human when Daniel arrived. She'd showered, changed clothes, even eaten something. I survived 4 days, she said, and there was a note of wonder in her voice. That's longer than I've made it since this started. How do you feel? Like death, but slightly less like death than yesterday. She managed a weak smile. Is this what winning feels like? This is what surviving feels like. Winning comes later. By the end of the first week, a routine had established itself. Daniel arrived at midnight, cleaned the penthouse while Rachel fought through the evening's worst cravings, and stayed until she was stable enough to be alone. They talked more than he'd talked to anyone except Maya in years. About addiction, about loss, about the strange isolation of their different worlds that somehow created a space where honesty became possible. Rachel told him about her rise through the tech world, how she'd built her company from a dorm room startup to a billion-dollar empire by the time she was 30. She told him about the pressure, the constant need to be brilliant and innovative and 3 steps ahead of the competition. She told him how the drugs had started as a solution, a way to work longer, think faster, be more than human, and gradually became the problem that swallowed everything else. Daniel told her about Sarah, about how they'd met in college and built a life together, about the pregnancy that was supposed to be the beginning of their family and instead became the end of everything he'd known. He told her about the grief that felt like drowning, about the terror of being solely responsible for a tiny human when he could barely keep himself alive. He told her about the long climb back to something like normalcy, powered by the knowledge that Maya needed him to survive. "You must think I'm pathetic," Rachel said one night during the second week. She was sitting on the floor of her living room, too restless to stay on furniture, while Daniel cleaned around her. "You lost everything and survived it without falling apart. I have everything, and I'm destroying myself anyway." "I did fall apart," Daniel corrected. "I fell apart spectacularly. The only difference is I had Maya to force me back together. You just had an empire that didn't care if you were broken as long as you kept being profitable." The observation seemed to strike Rachel deeply. She sat quietly for a long time, processing, before speaking again. "I don't know who I am without the company, without the work, without something making me feel like I matter. Then maybe it's time to find out." That night, after 2 weeks of fighting through withdrawal, Rachel made a decision. She called her assistant and cleared her schedule for a month, citing medical leave without specifying the nature of the medical issue. Then she called her vice president and put him in charge of day-to-day operations, instructing him to handle everything unless the building was literally on fire. "That's it?" Daniel asked when she hung up, looking shaken. "You just walked away from your company?" "I didn't walk away. I just stepped back far enough to learn how to breathe." She looked at him with eyes that were clearer than they'd been in weeks. "You were right. I can't run anything if I'm dead, and I've been dying for 2 years while pretending I was living. Maybe it's time to try the other way around." The month that followed was brutal. Without the distraction of work, Rachel had nothing to do but survive the craving, survive the boredom, survive the crushing weight of having to sit with her own thoughts without chemical assistance. She had days when she was convinced she'd made a terrible mistake, nights when she reached for her phone to call her source before remembering she'd deleted the number. Daniel was there through all of it, not as a savior, not as a therapist, but as a steady presence who'd survived his own version of hell and could promise her from experience that survival was possible. He brought her food when she couldn't bring herself to eat. He reminded her to shower, to sleep, to do basic maintenance on the body she'd been systematically neglecting. He answered her 3 a.m. phone calls when the cravings got bad, talking her through panic attacks with the calm certainty of someone who'd survived them himself. And slowly, impossibly, Rachel began to heal. 3 weeks into her medical leave, Rachel woke up one morning feeling something she hadn't felt in 2 years. Actual, genuine hunger. Not the artificial stimulation of drugs, not nausea fighting with exhaustion, but real physical hunger that made her stomach growl and her mouth water. She made herself breakfast, actual food, cooked in her previously unused kitchen, and ate it standing by the window, watching the city wake up below her. The eggs were a little rubbery, the toast slightly burnt, but it tasted like victory. When Daniel arrived that night, he found her in the kitchen, surrounded by grocery bags, attempting to figure out how to use her expensive appliances. "I went outside today," she announced, and the pride in her voice made Daniel smile. Actual outside. "I drove myself to the store, bought food, talked to the cashier like a normal human. I haven't done that in months. How was it?" "Terrifying and exhausting, and the fluorescent lights gave me a headache, and some teenager recognized me from a magazine and asked for a selfie." Rachel grinned, more genuine happiness in her expression than Daniel had ever seen. It was wonderful. The transformation over the next week was remarkable. Rachel started running in the mornings, pushing her body in new ways that had nothing to do with chemical enhancement. She reconnected with friends she'd been avoiding, awkward conversations where she didn't tell them the full truth, but at least stopped pretending everything was perfect. She even started cooking, badly at first, but with increasing competence and joy in the simple act of nourishing herself. But the real change was subtler, visible only to someone who'd been watching carefully. The tension that had lived in Rachel's shoulders for months began to ease. The frantic energy that used to drive her constant motion settled into something more natural. The fear that had haunted her eyes, that constant low-level terror of being discovered, being exposed, being revealed as the fraud she feared she was, gradually faded. She started sleeping through the night, started keeping regular hours, started being present in her own life instead of constantly trying to escape it. And she started to see Daniel as something other than just the night janitor who'd caught her at her lowest moment. "Tell me about Maya," she said one night during his 4th week of cleaning her penthouse. Really tell me. Not just that she exists, but who she is. Daniel looked up from cleaning the kitchen counter, surprised by the question and the genuine interest behind it. Why do you want to know? Because you've spent a month learning everything about me, and I've spent that same month being too self-absorbed to ask you anything real. Rachel leaned against the counter, looking more relaxed than he'd ever seen her. Because I'm trying to figure out how to be a person who cares about other people again, and you seem like a good person to practice on. So Daniel told her about Maya, about her obsession with dinosaurs and her fear of the dark, about the way she sang made-up songs while brushing her teeth, and how she insisted on wearing her purple tutu to preschool every single day. He told her about the challenges of single parenting, about parent-teacher conferences and scraped knees and the constant worry that he wasn't doing enough, being enough, giving her enough of whatever she needed to grow up whole and happy. Rachel listened with an intensity that suggested she was learning something important, though Daniel wasn't sure what lesson she was taking from his rambling stories about a 5-year-old's daily adventures. She's lucky to have you, Rachel said when he finished. You gave up everything to make sure she had what she needed. I didn't give up everything. I traded one life for another. Daniel paused, considering. Actually, I think I got the better deal. Corner office looks good on a business card, but it doesn't tuck you in at night and tell you you're the best dad in the world. Do you miss it, your old life? Sometimes. I miss the respect that came with the title, the sense that I was building something important. But then Maya hugs me in the morning, and I remember that I am building something important, just something that won't show up in any portfolio or win any awards. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. I don't know if I've built anything important, she said finally. I've built something profitable, something innovative, something that looks impressive in business journals. But I don't know if any of it actually matters. Why did you start your company? Daniel asked. Because I wanted to prove I could. Because I was broke and ambitious and convinced I was smarter than everyone who kept telling me to be realistic. Because, she stopped, thinking. Because I wanted to matter. I wanted my name to mean something. And does it mean something? Rachel's laugh was sharp. My name means I'm good at making money. That's about it. When I die, people will write articles about my business strategies and my net worth and my impact on the tech industry. Nobody's going to write about whether I was happy or whether I treated people well or whether I made the world actually better in any meaningful way. You could change that. How? I can't undo 2 years of slowly destroying myself, Daniel. I can't take back all the times I chose work over everything else, all the relationships I neglected, all the opportunities I missed to be something other than Rachel Monroe, tech mogul. No, Daniel agreed. But you can make different choices going forward. You can be someone different than who you've been. Rachel looked at him with something like hope in her eyes. You really believe that? I believe you've spent a month surviving something that almost killed you. If you can do that, you can do anything. The last week of Rachel's medical leave, she did something Daniel didn't expect. She asked him to stay after his shift ended, not because she needed help through a crisis, but because she wanted company. They sat in her living room as dawn broke over Los Angeles, drinking coffee and talking about nothing important. Books they'd read, movies they'd seen, the strange small details of ordinary life that had been absent from both their existences for different reasons. I go back next week, Rachel said as the sun fully rose. Back to the company, back to being Rachel Monroe, tech mogul. I'm terrified. Of using again? Of everything. Of whether I can run a company without drugs. Of whether I'm still good at what I do when I'm just myself. Of whether all those people who work for me are going to see me differently now. They won't see you differently, Daniel said. Because you're not going to tell them what you've been through. Rachel looked surprised. You think I should keep hiding it? I think you should protect your privacy. There's a difference between being honest with yourself and with the people you trust, and announcing your struggles to the entire world. He paused. But I also think you should find a real therapist. Go to actual support meetings. Build a network of people who understand addiction and recovery. You can't do this alone, long term. Will you still be here? The question was quiet, vulnerable. When I go back to work, will you still come clean my penthouse? Do you still want a night janitor who knows all your secrets? I want a friend who helped save my life, Rachel said. The fact that he also cleans my penthouse is just a bonus. Friend. The word hung in the air between them, redefining everything they'd been to each other over the past month. Daniel thought about professional boundaries, about the vast differences in their lives and worlds, about all the reasons this strange relationship made no sense. Then he thought about the phone calls at 3 a.m., the conversations that ranged from profound to ridiculous, the way Rachel had started asking about Maya and remembering details about his life, and treating him like someone who mattered beyond his utility as a cleaning service. "Yeah," he said. "I'll still be here." Rachel smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached her eyes and made her look younger, less weary, more alive than Daniel had ever seen her. "Good. Because I'm going to need someone to keep me honest. Someone who remembers what it looks like when I'm lying to myself. I can do that." "And Daniel?" She met his eyes, her expression serious. "Thank you. Not just for staying, but for seeing me when everyone else was looking away. For caring when it would have been easier not to. For believing I could survive this when I'd stopped believing it myself." Daniel felt his throat tighten with emotion he didn't quite have words for. "You survived it yourself," he said. "I just made sure you weren't alone while you did." That made all the difference. They sat together in comfortable silence as the city came fully awake below them, two people from different worlds who'd found an unexpected connection in the darkest hours. Daniel knew he should leave, get home to Maya, maintain some semblance of normal boundaries. But something kept him there a few minutes longer, some sense that this moment mattered, that after a month of crisis and struggle, they'd arrived somewhere worth acknowledging. "I need to tell you something," Rachel said suddenly. "And you're going to think it's crazy or inappropriate or both, so feel free to just ignore it and we'll pretend this conversation never happened." Daniel felt a spike of concern. "Okay. I'm giving you a raise, a significant one. And before you protest about charity or insult your pride, let me explain." She spoke quickly, as if afraid he'd interrupt. "I've spent the past month learning what it means to accept help, to let someone care about my well-being without owing them anything in return. But I've also spent that month watching you work 2 jobs, your night shift here and day shift somewhere else, just to make ends meet while raising your daughter alone. And that's not okay. Rachel, please let me finish. You've given me hours of your time that weren't part of your job description. You've answered phone calls at 3 in the morning. You've stayed with me through panic attacks and withdrawal and more breakdowns than I can count. And I know you didn't do it for money, and I know you'd keep doing it without any additional compensation because that's who you are." She took a breath. "But I'm not asking what you'd do. I'm telling you what I'm doing. Consider it hazard pay for dealing with a tech mogul's mental breakdown, or payment for services rendered beyond cleaning, or just accept that maybe this is how I'm learning to use my resources for something that actually matters." Daniel stared at her, caught between pride and practicality. The truth was that money was always tight. Daycare costs, rent, the constant juggling of expenses that came with single parenting on a janitor's wages. The truth was that he'd been skipping his own meals some weeks to make sure Maya had everything she needed. The truth was that a raise would mean actual financial breathing room for the first time in 5 years. But accepting it felt like crossing some line, turning their friendship into a transaction. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "I know I don't owe you. That's the point." Rachel's expression was fierce. "This isn't about debt or obligation. This is about me recognizing that your time has value, that your presence in my life has value, and that I want to make sure you're not destroying yourself to help other people survive." Sound familiar? The parallel wasn't subtle. Daniel found himself smiling despite his discomfort. "That's plain dirty. I learned from the best, a stubborn single dad who wouldn't leave me alone even when I tried to push him away." She pulled out her phone. "I'm sending the paperwork to my assistant today. You can accept it with grace, or you can fight me on it and lose because I've spent 10 years getting very good at winning arguments. Your choice." Daniel knew when he was beaten. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Really, thank you. Thank you for teaching me that accepting help doesn't make you weak, it makes you human." On her first day back at work, Rachel called Daniel at 11 a.m. He answered with a spike of concern. She never called during the day. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's fine. A pause. "I needed to hear a friendly voice. Is that okay?" Daniel was at a playground with Maya, watching her dominate the monkey bars, while other parents gave her tutu and rain boots combination side-eye. Of course it's okay. How's it going? Weird. Good weird, but weird. My vice president did an excellent job while I was gone, almost too excellent, and everyone keeps asking if I'm feeling better, but nobody asks what was wrong, which is both respectful and frustrating. Another pause. I'm not using, haven't even thought about it. But being back in this environment where everything moves so fast and everyone wants something from me, it's intense. That's normal. The first day back is always intense. When did you go back to work? After Sarah died? I didn't go back. I quit and became a janitor instead. Daniel watched Maya successfully complete the monkey bars and pump her fist in victory. But I remember my first day at the cleaning company, wondering if I'd made a huge mistake, if I could actually do this new life I'd chosen. It gets easier. Promise? Promise. Now go run your empire. I'll see you tonight. Daniel? Rachel's voice was soft. I'm really glad you answered. Me too. That night, Daniel arrived to find Rachel's penthouse transformed. She'd bought actual groceries that filled the previously empty refrigerator. She'd hung artwork on walls that had been bare. She'd added plants to corners that had been sterile. The space still looked expensive and minimalist, but now it looked lived in, like a home rather than a hotel. Rachel herself looked tired but satisfied, still in her work clothes but more relaxed than she'd been that morning. Survived day one, she announced. Nobody fired me, the stock didn't crash, and I only wanted to hide in my office bathroom twice. I'm calling that a victory. Sounds like a victory to me. They fell into a new routine over the following weeks. Daniel cleaned the penthouse, Rachel worked on healthier coping mechanisms than the ones that had nearly killed her, and they talked about everything and nothing, building a friendship that defied every conventional boundary of their employer-employee relationship. Rachel started going to support group meetings, awkward at first, but gradually finding value in sitting with other people who understood addiction from the inside. She found a therapist who specialized in high-functioning addicts, people whose outsides looked successful while their insides were falling apart. She built a recovery network that extended beyond just Daniel, creating a safety net for the moments when one person's support wasn't enough. And slowly, the woman Daniel had found dying in a penthouse transformed into someone who was actually living. One night in late spring, nearly 3 months after Rachel's last use, Daniel arrived to find her actually hosting with real guests and real food. 3 other women from her support group were there, laughing over takeout containers and sharing stories that ranged from heartbreaking to hilarious. They greeted Daniel warmly when he entered, and Rachel introduced him without any awkwardness. This is Daniel, the friend I told you about. Friend, not employee, not janitor, not some complicated relationship that required explanation, just friend. After the guests left, Rachel helped Daniel clean up the takeout debris. They worked in comfortable silence until she spoke. I never thanked you properly. You've thanked me dozens of times. Not for saving my life, though thank you for that too. I meant for seeing me. She stopped cleaning, turning to face him fully. You looked at me and saw a person who was suffering, not just a wealthy woman who had everything. You treated me like someone worth saving, even when I was pretty sure I wasn't. That gift of being seen and valued when you're at your absolute worst, that's the thing I'll never be able to repay. Daniel felt his chest tighten with emotion. You don't need to repay it. That's not how this works. I know. But I want you to understand what you did, Daniel. You gave me my life back, not because you fixed me or rescued me, but because you stayed present while I learned to fix myself. That's... Her voice caught. That's everything. They stood in her kitchen, the city sparkling through the windows, and something shifted in the space between them. An acknowledgement of how far they'd both come from that first night when he'd found her secret, and she'd been certain her life was over. You know what the strangest part is? Rachel said. I spent 2 years convinced I needed drugs to be brilliant, to run my company, to be the person everyone expected me to be. And now, 3 months clean, I'm doing better work than I've ever done. I'm more creative, more focused, more actually present with my team. Turns out you don't need chemical enhancement to be good at your job. You just need to not be slowly dying. Daniel laughed. That does seem to help. And I have time for things I'd forgotten existed: friends, hobbies, sleep, actual meals that aren't eaten standing up while reading reports. She smiled. I even started painting again, something I did in college and abandoned once work took over. I'm terrible at it, but that's not the point. What is the point? That I get to be terrible at something without it mattering. That I can try things just because they bring me joy, not because they're productive or impressive or going to look good in my biography. She gestured around the penthouse. This place used to feel like a beautiful prison. Now it feels like home. That's because of you. That's because of you, Daniel corrected. I just didn't let you die while you figured out how to live. And that, Rachel said, made all the difference. The penthouse still looked perfect. Expensive furniture, designer everything, the kind of space that belonged in architecture magazines. But now it held evidence of an actual life. Books on the coffee table, dishes in the sink, a yoga mat by the window, photographs of Rachel with her support group friends, a half-finished painting propped against the wall. And most importantly, it held someone who was finally, genuinely, learning how to be alive. As Daniel prepared to leave that night, Rachel walked him to the door, something she'd started doing over the past month, a small gesture that felt significant. Same time tomorrow? She asked. Same time tomorrow. Good, she smiled. I'll try to make less of a mess to clean up. Please don't, I'd be out of a job. They both laughed, and Daniel left with a lightness in his chest that had nothing to do with the generous raise Rachel had insisted on, and everything to do with the knowledge that sometimes, when you show up for someone at their darkest moment, you end up saving more than one life. He drove home through the pre-dawn darkness, thinking about the woman who'd been dying in a penthouse and was now painting terrible art and hosting dinner parties and learning how to be human again. He thought about the strange gift of being present for someone's transformation, of witnessing the moment when survival became living. And he thought about Maya, waiting for him at home, who taught him that love sometimes meant just showing up, day after day, hour after hour, being present even when everything felt impossible. That was all anyone needed, really, someone who refused to walk away. Someone who saw you clearly, not the polished version, not the successful image, but the struggling, scared, imperfect human underneath, and chose to stay anyway. Someone who believed you could survive, even when you'd stopped believing it yourself. Rachel Monroe had nearly died in her perfect penthouse, surrounded by all the money and success anyone could want, completely alone with the thing that was killing her. But she'd survived. Not because someone rescued her, but because someone stayed present while she learned to rescue herself. And that, Daniel thought as he pulled into his apartment complex just as the sun was rising, was everything. He climbed the stairs to his apartment where Maya would be waking up soon, ready for breakfast and cartoons and another day of being 5 years old. His phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Made it through another day. Thank you for being there. He sent back, anytime. That's what friends are for. And he meant it. The transition from crisis management to genuine friendship happened so gradually that neither of them noticed exactly when it occurred. 6 months after Rachel's last use, Daniel still arrived at midnight to clean her penthouse, but the nature of his visits had shifted into something neither of them quite knew how to name. Some nights, Rachel would already be asleep when he arrived, and he'd clean quietly and leave her a note on the kitchen counter. Small observations about her day based on the evidence she left behind, reminders to eat the leftovers in her fridge, encouragement for whatever challenge she'd mentioned facing. Other nights she'd be awake, and they'd talk while he worked, conversations that ranged from the mundane details of raising a 5-year-old to the existential questions of what made a life meaningful. But it was the nights when Rachel struggled that revealed the depth of what they'd built together. 6 months clean was a milestone, but it didn't mean the cravings disappeared or the temptation vanished. It just meant she'd gotten better at surviving them. On a humid night in late June, Daniel arrived to find Rachel sitting on her balcony, staring out at the glittering sprawl of Los Angeles with an expression he recognized immediately. He'd seen it on his own face in the mirror during those first terrible months after Sarah died. The look of someone standing too close to an edge, weighing whether it would be easier to jump. He didn't announce his presence, just went to her kitchen and made 2 cups of coffee the way she liked it. Strong enough to wake the dead, as she always said. Then he joined her on the balcony, setting 1 cup beside her without a word. Rachel glanced at the coffee, then at him, and something in her face crumpled slightly. How did you know? You left your phone on the counter with your dealer's old number pulled up. You didn't call, but you thought about it hard enough to find the number. Daniel settled into the chair beside hers, his voice calm and non-judgmental. Bad day. Bad everything. She wrapped her hands around the coffee cup like it could anchor her to something solid. I lost a major contract today. Not because I did anything wrong, just because the client went with a competitor. It happens. It's business. Except all I could think about was how much easier it would be to deal with this disappointment if I could just... She stopped, breathing hard. If you could just not feel it, Daniel finished. Yeah. The word came out broken. God, I'm tired of feeling everything so intensely. When I was using, nothing hurt this much. Failure was just data. Disappointment was just noise. Now everything cuts deep, and I don't know how people live like this all the time. Daniel sipped his coffee, choosing his words carefully. You know what Maya said to me last week? She fell off the monkey bars and scraped her knee badly enough that I thought we'd need stitches. And while I was cleaning her up, she said, Daddy, it hurts, but I'm glad I can feel it because that means I'm still alive enough to try again tomorrow. Rachel let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Your 5-year-old is wiser than I am. She's wiser than both of us. Kids haven't learned yet that feeling things is supposed to be something we avoid. He paused. But she's right. The hurt means you're alive enough to try again tomorrow. The contract you lost today? That failure only stings because you care about your work, because you're invested in doing it well, because you're actually present in your life now instead of floating above it in a chemical haze. I hate being present sometimes, Rachel whispered. I hate that everything matters so much. I know, but the alternative is worse. You remember the alternative. She nodded slowly, her hand still trembling around the coffee cup. I didn't call the number. I wanted to. I sat there for 20 minutes with my finger hovering over the call button, but I didn't do it. That counts. That's a victory. Doesn't feel like a victory. Feels like I barely survived. Sometimes barely surviving is the same as winning, Daniel said. Sometimes the victory is just making it through the day without destroying everything you've built. They sat in silence for a while, the city humming below them, the night air heavy with summer heat. Daniel knew he should probably start his actual work, but something kept him there. The sense that this moment mattered, that Rachel needed someone to bear witness to her struggle instead of just praising her success. Finally, Rachel spoke again. Tell me something good, something that has nothing to do with business or recovery or any of this heavy stuff. Tell me about something that made you happy this week. Daniel thought for a moment. Maya learned to ride a bike without training wheels. She'd been too scared to try, convinced she'd fall and hurt herself. But last Saturday, she just decided she was ready, made me take her to the park, got on that bike, and took off like she'd been doing it her whole life. That's amazing. Rachel's smile was small but genuine. Were you terrified? Absolutely. I ran behind her the whole time, ready to catch her if she fell. But she didn't fall. She just kept going, getting braver with every turn. He paused. Actually, that's not true. She did fall once, scraped her elbow pretty good, but she got back up, told me she wasn't done yet, and kept riding until the sun went down. She gets that from you, the not giving up thing. No, she gets that from her mother. Sarah was the strongest person I've ever known. Right up until the end, she was making jokes with the doctors, telling me everything would be fine, refusing to give up even when her body was. Daniel's voice caught slightly. Maya has her mother's courage. I just try to make sure she has space to use it. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. Do you ever resent it? That she lived, and Sarah didn't? The question was so raw, so honest, that Daniel had to respect it even as it cut close to thoughts he'd wrestled with in his darkest moments. No, but I felt guilty about not resenting it. Like there was something wrong with me that I could lose my wife and still feel nothing but gratitude that Maya survived. He set down his coffee cup. Grief is complicated. It doesn't follow rules. You can be devastated and grateful at the same time. You can miss someone desperately and still find joy in living. How did you learn to do that, to hold contradictory feelings without falling apart? I didn't learn. I just survived enough days that eventually I looked up and realized I was doing both, grieving Sarah and loving life with Maya, and the world hadn't ended. He met Rachel's eyes. You're learning the same thing. You can hate how hard recovery is and still be grateful you're alive. Both things are true. Rachel nodded slowly, processing. I think I'm starting to understand that. Some days I wake up and I'm proud of myself for surviving this long. Other days I wake up and think about how much easier it would be to stop fighting. Both versions of me are real. The difference is which version of you makes the decisions. And what if I don't trust myself to make the right decisions? What if the version of me that wants to give up eventually wins? Daniel considered this carefully. Then you call someone. You reach out before you reach for the drugs. You let someone else help you make the decision until you're strong enough to make it yourself. He pulled out his phone and set it on the table between them. That's what I'm here for. That's what your support group is for. That's why you don't do this alone. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, but it is straightforward. When you can't save yourself, you let someone else help. When they can't save themselves, you help them. That's how people survive impossible things. Rachel picked up his phone, scrolling through their text history, months of conversations, hundreds of messages exchanged during her darkest moments and her brightest victories. You've answered every single time I've called. 3 a.m, during your day with Maya, even when you were sick with the flu. You've always answered. Because that's what friends do. Is that what we are? Rachel asked quietly. Friends? Because sometimes I think we're something else, something I don't have a name for. You're not my employee anymore, not really. You still clean my penthouse, but that feels almost incidental to whatever this actually is. Daniel had been wondering the same thing for months. How to categorize a relationship that had started with him finding her secret and evolved into something that defied easy classification. They weren't dating, weren't family, weren't business associates, but friends felt inadequate for what they'd become to each other. I think, he said slowly, we're the people who showed up for each other when nobody else was watching, and that creates a bond that doesn't fit in any normal category. I like that. Rachel set down his phone. The people who showed up, that feels right. A notification buzzed on Daniel's phone, a text from his neighbor who watched Maya during his night shifts. Everything okay? Maya had a bad dream. I got her back to sleep, but she's asking for you. Daniel's chest tightened with the familiar guilt of being needed in 2 places at once. I should go. Maya needs me. Of course. Rachel stood immediately. Thank you for staying with me through this, for not making me feel pathetic for struggling. You're not pathetic for struggling. You're human for struggling. He gathered his cleaning supplies, then paused. Rachel, the fact that you didn't call your dealer tonight, that's huge. That's everything. Tomorrow you might have a different battle, but tonight you won this one. Tonight I won because you were here. Then tomorrow, when I'm not here, and the battle comes anyway, you call me. Or you call someone from your group. Or you call your therapist. The point is, you don't fight alone. Rachel walked him to the door, and for a moment they stood in the threshold, the comfortable silence of people who'd earned the right not to fill every space with words. Daniel? Rachel said as he was leaving. Thank you for making me believe that barely surviving still counts as winning. Anytime. That's what friends are for. He said it lightly, but as he drove home through the empty streets, Daniel found himself thinking about Rachel's question. What were they exactly? He'd had plenty of friends over the years, college buddies, work colleagues, other parents from Maya's preschool. But none of those relationships carried the weight of what he had with Rachel. None of them involved talking someone down from relapse at 3 a.m. or bearing witness to the slow, painful work of rebuilding a life from scratch. Maybe Rachel was right. Maybe they were something that didn't have a name yet, some new category of connection born from crisis and sustained by genuine care. The next morning, over breakfast with Maya, his phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Made it through the night without calling. Woke up this morning feeling like I could breathe again. Thank you for reminding me that barely surviving still counts. Daniel showed the text to Maya, who was currently using her pancakes to build a syrup lake. See this? This is from my friend Rachel. She was having a really hard day yesterday, and I helped her feel better. Maya looked up, syrup on her chin. Is she the pretty lady who lives in the tall building? Daniel blinked. How did you know about Rachel? You talk about her sometimes when you think I'm sleeping, and you smile at your phone when she texts you. Maya returned to her pancake engineering project. She must be a really good friend if she makes you smile like Mommy did in the pictures. The observation was so casually perceptive that Daniel didn't know how to respond. Did he smile when Rachel texted him? Did he talk about her when he thought Maya wasn't listening? And what did it mean that his 5-year-old had noticed? She is a good friend, Daniel said carefully. She's going through some hard things, and I'm trying to help her the way people helped me when Mommy died. That's good. People should help each other. Maya took an enormous bite of pancake. Can I meet her sometime? I want to see the tall building. Maybe someday. She's very busy with work. That's okay. I'm busy with kindergarten starting soon. Maya's expression turned serious. Daddy, do you think I'll be good at kindergarten? What if the other kids don't like me? Daniel knelt beside her chair, wiping the syrup from her chin. You're going to be amazing at kindergarten. And if some kids don't like you right away, that's okay. You just have to find the ones who appreciate a girl who wears tutus with rain boots and knows all the dinosaur names. What if I can't find those kids? Then you be yourself anyway, and eventually they'll find you. That's how the best friendships work. You don't have to change who you are to make them happen. Maya seemed satisfied with this wisdom and returned to her breakfast. But Daniel sat there thinking about his own advice, about how it applied to more than just kindergarten friendships. He'd become friends with Rachel by just being himself, not trying to impress her, not changing his values to fit her world, just showing up honestly and letting the connection grow from there. Maybe that was the answer to what they were. They were two people who'd shown up honestly in each other's lives and found something worth keeping. The pattern continued through the summer. Daniel worked his shifts, Rachel ran her company, and somewhere in the overlap they built something that sustained them both. She started asking about Maya more, wanting details about her daily adventures and her preparation for kindergarten. He started sharing more about the challenges of single parenting, the loneliness of it, the constant worry, the way he sometimes felt like he was failing at everything, even when logically he knew he was doing fine. One August night, Rachel surprised him by saying, "Bring her with you sometime. Maya, I'd like to meet her." Daniel paused in the middle of dusting her bookshelf. "Are you sure? She's a lot of energy for a Tuesday night." "I'm sure. I've been thinking. You've been part of my recovery for 8 months now. You know everything about my worst moments and my daily struggles. But I don't really know the biggest part of your life." Rachel's expression was tentative. "Unless you think it's a bad idea. I understand if you want to keep that separation." "No, it's not that. I just..." Daniel tried to articulate the protective instinct rising in his chest. "Maya's been through a lot. She doesn't have a mother, doesn't have much family beyond me. I'm careful about who I bring into her life." "I understand, really." Rachel's voice was soft. "Forget I mentioned it." But Daniel was already reconsidering. Maya had been asking about Rachel for weeks, curious about this mysterious friend who made her daddy smile, and Rachel had proven herself trustworthy in every way that mattered. Maybe it was time to let these two parts of his life intersect. "How about this weekend?" Daniel heard himself say. "Saturday afternoon. I'll bring her by for an hour, let her see the tall building she's been curious about. If it goes well, maybe it can happen again." Rachel's face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Really? You'd do that?" "Yeah, just be prepared. She's going to ask you 1,000,000 questions and probably want to show you her entire collection of dinosaur facts. I look forward to it." Saturday afternoon arrived with California sunshine and Maya's insistence on wearing her favorite purple tutu over her shorts because first impressions are important, Daddy. Daniel drove them to Rachel's building with butterflies in his stomach, suddenly nervous in a way he hadn't been since his first date with Sarah a lifetime ago. The doorman recognized Daniel and waved them through without question, though his eyebrows raised slightly at the sight of the small girl in a tutu holding Daniel's hand. They rode the elevator to the penthouse in silence, Maya staring wide-eyed at her reflection in the polished walls. "It's so fancy," she whispered. "Does Princess Rachel live in a castle?" "She's not a princess, she's a businesswoman." "She could be both. Princess Leia was a princess and a general." Daniel couldn't argue with that logic. Rachel answered the door in jeans and a casual sweater, the most normal Daniel had ever seen her look. Her face was makeup-free, Her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she looked younger and more approachable than the polished executive he'd first met 9 months ago. "Hi," she said, her nervous energy matching his. "You must be Maya." Maya stepped forward with the confidence of someone who'd never met a stranger she didn't like. "Hi. You're even prettier than in the pictures Daddy doesn't know I've seen on his phone. I like your penthouse. Can I see the whole thing? Do you have any pets? What's your favorite dinosaur?" Rachel laughed, a genuine, delighted sound that made something in Daniel's chest relax. "Thank you, yes, no, and probably velociraptors because they're smart and work in teams." "Good answer," Maya beamed. "Can I see the view? Daddy says you can see the whole city from here." "Absolutely. Come on." Rachel led Maya to the floor-to-ceiling windows, and Daniel watched as his daughter pressed her nose against the glass, exclaiming over every landmark she recognized. Rachel crouched beside her, pointing out different buildings and telling her what they were, engaging with Maya's endless enthusiasm in a way that made his heart do something complicated in his chest. "That's where your daddy used to work," Rachel said, pointing to a tall building in the distance. "Before you were born, he designed buildings like that one." Maya turned to Daniel with wide eyes. "Really? You made buildings?" "I helped design them. It was a long time ago." "That's so cool. Why did you stop?" "Because I got something better. I got you." Maya seemed satisfied with this answer and turned back to the window. Rachel caught Daniel's eye over his daughter's head, and something passed between them, an understanding, maybe, of what it meant to let someone into the parts of your life you usually kept protected. The hour Daniel had planned turned into 3. Rachel had somehow procured art supplies and set Maya up at her dining table to draw while they talked. Maya created an elaborate picture of a princess who was also a business mogul who also rode velociraptors to work, explaining the entire story to Rachel with earnest detail. "And this is Princess Rachel Monroe," Maya explained, pointing to a figure with a crown and a briefcase. "She runs a kingdom, but she's also very brave because she fought dragons and won. The dragons were actually her fears, but she beat them by being strong and having good friends like Sir Daniel the Protector." Rachel's eyes had gotten suspiciously shiny. "That's a beautiful story, Maya. Can I keep this picture?" "Yes! You can put it on your fridge like Daddy puts mine." Later, while Maya was occupied with a snack Rachel had ordered from a nearby bakery. "I don't cook, but I'm excellent at takeout." Rachel and Daniel stood by the kitchen window, watching the city below. "Thank you for bringing her," Rachel said quietly. "She's wonderful. You've done an incredible job." "She's easy to love." "Maybe. But you've still raised her alone through impossible circumstances, and she's turning out kind and confident and joyful. That's your doing." Rachel paused. "She talks about you like you're her hero." "That's terrifying. I have no idea what I'm doing most of the time." "None of us do. We just show up and hope it's enough." She glanced at Maya, who was now examining the expensive art on Rachel's walls with sticky fingers. "She said something interesting earlier while you were in the bathroom. She told me she's glad I'm your friend because you seem happier when you talk about me." Daniel felt heat creep up his neck. "She's very observant. Is it true? Do I make you happy?" The question was simple but loaded with complexity. Daniel thought about the past 8 months, the late-night calls, the honest conversations, the way talking to Rachel had become one of the steadiest parts of his routine. Thought about how she'd started asking about his life with genuine interest, remembering details about Maya, caring about his struggles the way he cared about hers. "Yeah," he said, "you do. This friendship, whatever it is we're doing, it makes my life better." Rachel's smile was soft and genuine. "It makes my life better too. More than better, actually. You've given me back things I thought I'd lost forever. The ability to trust someone, to be vulnerable, to believe that I'm worth caring about beyond what I can do or produce. You were always worth caring about. You just couldn't see it through the addiction. And now I can, because you didn't give up on me." They stood there in comfortable silence, watching Maya examine Rachel's collection of abstract sculptures with the serious concentration of a museum curator. Daniel felt something settling in his chest, a sense of rightness, of pieces fitting together in a way he hadn't expected but couldn't deny. "Can we come back?" Maya asked suddenly, appearing beside them. Rachel promised to show me how to make art on a computer next time. And she said she wants to hear more dinosaur facts. We'll see, Daniel said automatically. That's parent language for probably yes, Maya told Rachel confidently. Rachel laughed. Is it? It is when Daddy smiles while he says it. As they prepared to leave, Maya gave Rachel an impulsive hug that clearly surprised both of them. Thank you for being my daddy's friend, Maya said. He needs more friends who make him smile. Rachel hugged her back, careful and gentle. Thank you for sharing him with me. In the car driving home, Maya chattered nonstop about Rachel's penthouse, the view, the art supplies, the snacks. She's really nice, Daddy. I like her. Can we visit again soon? Maybe, if she invites us. She will. She likes us. I could tell. Maya was quiet for a moment, then asked, Daddy, is Rachel going to be like Aunt Sophie? Sophie was Daniel's neighbor, the one who watched Maya during his night shifts, a friendly maternal presence, but not someone deeply integrated into their lives. No, Daniel said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. Rachel's different. Different how? Daniel thought about how to explain it to a 5-year-old. Aunt Sophie is a good friend who helps us when we need it. But Rachel is someone who's become part of our lives in a bigger way, someone we care about and who cares about us. Like family? Maybe. A new kind of family that we're building. Maya seemed satisfied with this. Good. I like our new family. That night, after Maya was asleep, Daniel received a text from Rachel. Thank you for today. Meeting Maya was one of the best things that's happened to me in months. She's magical. He wrote back, thank you for being so good with her. She hasn't stopped talking about you. There was a pause, then, Daniel, I know this is probably crossing some line, but I need to tell you something. Having you and Maya here today, laughing in my penthouse that used to feel like a beautiful prison, it made me realize how much my life has changed because you refused to walk away. I don't know what we are to each other exactly, but whatever it is, it's the most real thing I've had in years. Daniel stared at the text for a long time, feeling the weight of what she was saying and what he felt in response. Finally, he typed, it's the most real thing I've had too. Since Sarah died, I've been so focused on surviving and taking care of Maya that I forgot what it's like to have someone care about me as more than just Maya's dad. You've reminded me that I'm still a person with my own life worth living. Rachel's response came quickly. We're good for each other, aren't we? Yeah, Daniel wrote back. We really are. The friendship deepened through the fall as Maya started kindergarten and Rachel celebrated 9 months clean. They fell into an easy rhythm. Daniel still worked his night shifts at her penthouse, but now he'd arrive earlier some evenings for dinner with Rachel, bringing Maya along when schedules permitted. Rachel became a steady presence in their lives, showing up for Maya's kindergarten art show, helping Daniel navigate the complicated world of parent-teacher conferences, even learning to make simple meals so she could feed them when they visited. On a crisp October evening, Daniel arrived at her penthouse for his usual shift to find Rachel standing at the window, her posture tense in a way he'd learned to recognize as trouble. He set down his cleaning supplies and joined her, waiting for her to speak. 10 months clean today, Rachel said finally. Double digits. I should feel proud. But you don't? I do. But I also feel angry. She turned to face him, her expression fierce. I keep thinking about all the time I wasted. 2 years of my life gone, just gone. 2 years I could have been building real relationships, doing meaningful work, actually living instead of just surviving. I'll never get that time back. Daniel understood the anger. He'd felt it himself about the months he'd lost to grief and pills after Sarah died. No, you won't get it back. But you can make the next 2 years different, the next 10 years, the rest of your life. Ooh, what if it's not enough? What if I've already wasted my best years? Rachel, you're 32. Your life isn't over. It's barely started. He gestured around the penthouse. Look at what you've built in 10 months. Real friendships, healthy habits, a life that actually feels worth living. Imagine what you can build in 10 years. I want things I didn't used to want, Rachel said quietly. I used to think success meant quarterly earnings and market share and magazine covers. Now I want... She stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. I want connections. I want to matter to people in ways that have nothing to do with my company or my money. I want to build something that lasts beyond the next product launch. You're already doing that. You matter to your support group. You matter to Maya. You matter to me. And you don't know how much that means. Rachel's voice was thick with emotion. Some days, knowing that I matter to you and Maya is the only thing that keeps me going. Not my company, not my success, just the fact that there are people who'd actually notice if I disappeared. They stood together at the window, watching the city lights flicker on as twilight deepened. Daniel thought about how far they'd both come. Rachel from active addiction to 10 months of hard-won sobriety, himself from the isolation of early single parenthood to having someone he could talk to about the parts of his life he usually kept hidden. "Can I tell you something?" Rachel asked. "Something I've been thinking about but haven't said out loud?" "Always. I think I'm falling for you. Not in some dramatic movie romance way. Just gradually falling for the person who showed up in my life when I was dying and refused to let me die alone. For the man who brings his daughter to visit me because he trusts me not to hurt her. For the friend who answers his phone at 3 a.m. and never makes me feel like a burden." She paused, breathing hard. "And I don't know what to do with that. Because we make no sense together. Different worlds, different lives. You're my employee, technically. You're a single father who doesn't need the complication of someone like me. Every rational part of me knows this is a terrible idea." Daniel's heart was pounding hard enough he could hear it in his ears. And what does the irrational part say? That I've never felt this safe with anyone. That when I'm with you and Maya, I don't feel like Rachel Monroe, tech mogul. I just feel like Rachel, someone who's still figuring out how to live, but at least figuring it out with people who care. She finally met his eyes. The irrational part says that maybe it doesn't matter if we make sense on paper. Maybe what matters is that we make sense to each other. Everything Daniel had been carefully not acknowledging for months suddenly rushed to the surface. The way his heart lifted when his phone buzzed with her texts. The way he looked forward to their conversations more than anything else in his routine. The way watching her with Maya had made him feel something he hadn't felt since Sarah died. "I'm falling for you too," he said, and the admission felt both terrifying and liberating. "Have been for months, probably. I kept telling myself it was just the intensity of helping you through recovery, just the bond that forms when you save someone's life. But it's more than that." "What is it then?" Daniel thought carefully before answering. "It's that you make me remember I'm more than just Maya's dad. That I'm allowed to want things for myself, to have relationships that matter, to build something beyond just survival." He paused. "It's that you see me clearly, not the successful architect I used to be, not the guy who gave up his career, just who I actually am right now, and you care about that person anyway." Rachel's eyes were shining. "So what do we do with this?" "I don't know. Take it slow. Figure out if what we feel in crisis holds up in normal life. Make sure Maya's okay with whatever this becomes." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "I've never done this before. Dating as a single parent, falling for someone while still grieving the person I lost. I have no idea what I'm doing. I've never done this either. Dating in recovery, trying to build something real with someone who's seen me at my absolute worst. We're both stumbling through new territory." "Then we stumble through it together," Daniel said. "One day at a time, just like your recovery. No pressure, no expectations. Just see where this goes when we let ourselves actually feel it instead of pretending we don't." Rachel stepped closer, close enough that he could see the tears on her lashes. "I'm scared. What if I mess this up? What if I relapse and destroy this like I've destroyed everything else?" "Then we deal with it together, like we've been dealing with everything else." Daniel reached out and took her hand, the touch sending electricity through him. "Rachel, you're 10 months clean. You've done the hardest work of your life. You can do this too." She squeezed his hand tightly. "Promise me something? Promise that if this goes wrong, if I hurt you or Maya, you'll walk away. Don't try to save me at the expense of your own life again." "I promise that Maya comes first, always. But I don't think you're going to hurt us, Rachel. I think you're going to surprise yourself with how strong you've become." They stood there holding hands, the penthouse quiet around them, and something fundamental shifted between them, from friendship forged in crisis to something deeper, more complex, more frightening and more precious because they were choosing it with eyes wide open. When Daniel finally left that night, Much later than usual, and without doing any actual cleaning, he drove home feeling lighter than he had in 5 years. His phone buzzed at a red light. Rachel. Thank you for not running away when I told you the truth. Daniel. Thank you for trusting me enough to tell it. Rachel. So this is happening? We're really doing this? Daniel. Yeah, we're really doing this. Slowly, carefully, but really. Rachel. I like slowly and carefully. Daniel. Good. Because I'm terrified and I need to take this at a pace that doesn't scare me into running. Rachel. Deal. We'll be terrified together. That felt right. Being terrified together, stumbling through new territory together, building something neither of them quite knew how to name, but both recognized as worth fighting for. The next morning, Maya asked over pancakes, Daddy, why are you smiling at your phone so much? Because Rachel makes me happy, sweetheart. I know that, but this is a different kind of happy. Maya studied him with her unsettling 5-year-old perceptiveness. This is like the happy in the pictures with Mommy, the kind where your eyes smile too. Daniel set down his phone, his chest tight with emotion. Would that be okay with you? If Rachel and I became more than just friends? Maya considered this seriously. Will she still teach me computer art? Probably. Will she still ask me about dinosaurs? Definitely. Will she make you keep smiling like that? I think so. I hope so. Maya nodded decisively. Then it's okay. You should get to be happy too, Daddy. Not just make me happy, but your own happy. Daniel pulled his daughter into a hug, marveling at her wisdom. When did you get so smart? I've always been this smart. You just noticed. That night, Daniel arrived at Rachel's penthouse at their new earlier time, 7 p.m. instead of midnight, a shift that acknowledged they were something different now. Rachel greeted him at the door with nervous energy and a confession. I made dinner, or tried to. It might be terrible. I've never actually cooked for someone I was dating before. Wait, are we dating? Is that what this is? Daniel laughed, kissed her forehead in a gesture that felt natural despite its newness, and said, Yeah, I think we're dating, and I'm sure dinner is fine. It wasn't fine. It was objectively terrible. Overcooked pasta with sauce that was somehow both bland and overwhelming. But they ate it anyway, laughing about Rachel's lack of cooking skills and making plans for Daniel to teach her the basics. And somewhere between the terrible food and the easy conversation and the way Rachel's hand found his across the table, Daniel realized he was building something new. Not a replacement for what he'd had with Sarah, but something different and precious in its own way. A second chance at happiness he'd stopped believing he deserved. As the evening ended and Daniel prepared to do his actual job, cleaning the penthouse, Rachel stopped him with a question. Do you still need this job? The cleaning? Her voice was careful. Because the raise I gave you months ago, it was substantial enough that you could quit your night shift if you wanted. Spend those hours with Maya instead. Daniel had been avoiding thinking about this, about how the job that had brought them together was becoming increasingly irrelevant to what they actually were to each other now. I could quit. Financially, I'd be fine. But then, what reason would I have to be here every night? How about this reason? Rachel kissed him softly, tentatively, giving him every opportunity to pull away. When he didn't, when he kissed her back with months of denied feeling behind it, she smiled against his mouth. Is that reason enough? Yeah, Daniel said, slightly breathless. That's reason enough. So he quit his night shift at her penthouse and started coming over as her boyfriend instead of her employee, a transition that should have been awkward but somehow wasn't. They were already experts at being together, already comfortable in each other's space. The only thing that changed was now they didn't pretend the connection was just friendship. 3 months into dating, Rachel met Daniel's small circle of friends, other single parents from Maya's kindergarten, his neighbor Sophie, the few people he'd kept close through the isolation of early grief. They looked at her with undisguised curiosity, trying to reconcile the polished tech executive with the woman who showed up to a playground playdate in jeans and sneakers, helping Maya navigate the monkey bars with genuine interest. Later, one of the other parents pulled Daniel aside. Is that really Rachel Monroe, the billionaire? That's really her. How did you two even meet? Daniel smiled, thinking about a night 9 months ago when he'd found a drug pipe in her trash and made the choice to care. It's a long story, But the short version is she needed help and I was there. Everything else built from that. She seems different than what I expected. More normal. She is normal. She just happens to also be a genius businesswoman. Daniel watched Rachel push Maya on the swings, both of them laughing at something. The best parts of her have nothing to do with her company or her money. They're just who she is when she lets herself be human. That night, after Maya was in bed, Rachel curled up beside Daniel on his modest couch, such a contrast to her penthouse furniture, and said, "Your friends are nice. They actually like me for me, not for what I can do for them." Because they don't know you as Rachel Monroe, tech mogul. They know you as Maya's friend Rachel, who pushes her on swings and asks about their kids and fits into our strange little community. I like fitting into your community. I like being regular Rachel instead of the person everyone wants something from. She paused. Is it wrong that I'm happier here, in your tiny apartment with your mismatched furniture, than I've ever been in my penthouse? No. Because this place has something your penthouse didn't. Actual life happening in it. Maya's toys everywhere, dishes in the sink, that water stain on the ceiling I keep meaning to fix. It's messy and imperfect and real. I want more of this, Rachel said quietly. More messy, imperfect, real life. Less polished performance. You're building it, one day at a time. And she was. Over the months that followed, Rachel continued transforming her life. Not in dramatic ways, but in subtle, sustainable shifts that accumulated into genuine change. She started delegating more at work, trusting her team instead of trying to control everything herself. She made time for hobbies that had nothing to do with productivity. She let people see her be imperfect and discovered they liked her better for it. Most importantly, she stayed clean. Through stress and disappointment and the daily grind of running a company, she stayed clean. The cravings became less frequent, less intense. The fear that she'd relapse and destroy everything became background noise instead of constant terror. She built a life worth staying sober for, and that made all the difference. By the time Rachel reached her one-year anniversary of sobriety, she'd become someone Daniel barely recognized from the woman he'd first found dying in her penthouse. She was healthier, happier, more present in her own life. The transformation was remarkable. And through it all, she and Daniel built something together, slowly, carefully, with Maya's well-being always at the center of their decisions. It wasn't a fairy tale romance. It was something better, a real partnership between two people who'd survived impossible things and found each other on the other side. If you or someone you know is having a difficult time, free support is available. Find resources. The one-year anniversary arrived on a cold March evening with rain streaming down Rachel's penthouse windows and Daniel nervously adjusting his tie for the third time. They were hosting a small celebration, Rachel's support group, a few close friends, Maya, and Daniel's neighbor Sophie, who'd become an unexpected ally in their unusual relationship. It was the first time Rachel had publicly acknowledged her recovery. The first time she'd invited people into her space to witness both her vulnerability and her strength. "Stop fidgeting," Rachel said, appearing beside him in a dress that managed to be both elegant and understated. "You look perfect." "I'm not the one people are here to celebrate." "You are." Daniel caught her hand, squeezing gently. "How are you feeling?" "Terrified, proud, grateful." She leaned into him, drawing strength from his solidity. "A year ago, I was convinced I'd be dead within months. And now I'm here, hosting a party, dating an incredible man, with actual friends who know the real me. It feels impossible." "It feels earned," Daniel corrected. "You fought for this, Rachel. Every single day for a year, you chose to keep fighting. That's not impossible. That's just you being stronger than you knew." Before Rachel could respond, the doorbell chimed and Maya came running from the kitchen where she'd been helping arrange snacks, mostly by eating them and providing earnest commentary on which ones were best. She'd insisted on wearing her fanciest dress for the occasion, a sparkly purple number that clashed magnificently with her dinosaur print sneakers. "They're here," Maya announced, grabbing Rachel's hand with the casual affection of a child who'd fully accepted this woman into her life. "Come on, Rachel. We have to greet them together because you're the birthday girl, except it's not your birthday. It's your alive day." Rachel's eyes filled with tears at the phrasing. "Alive day. I like that, sweetheart." The next hour filled the penthouse with warmth and noise and the kind of genuine celebration that had nothing to do with business achievements or social performance. Rachel's support group members shared their own milestone stories, creating a tapestry of survival that reminded everyone in the room that recovery was possible, that people did make it through the impossible. Daniel watched Rachel move through the gathering with increasing confidence, accepting congratulations and sharing the truth of her journey with people who understood it from the inside. At one point, one of the support group members, a woman named Jennifer, who'd been clean for 3 years, pulled Daniel aside. "You know you probably saved her life, right? Most people in Rachel's position don't make it. They have too much money, too much access, too many enablers telling them what they want to hear instead of what they need to hear." "I didn't save her," Daniel said firmly. "She saved herself. I just didn't walk away." "That's saving her," Jennifer insisted. "Staying when everyone else leaves, that's everything. My husband walked away 2 months into my recovery and said he couldn't watch me destroy myself anymore. I don't blame him, but his absence made everything 10 times harder." She glanced at Rachel, who was currently explaining something to Maya with animated hand gestures. "You gave her a reason to survive. That's a gift most addicts never receive." Daniel thought about this as the evening continued, about how much of Rachel's success came from her own determination and how much came from having someone witness her struggle without judgment. Maybe it was both. Individual strength supported by collective care. Maybe that was how anyone survived impossible things. Later, after the guests had left and Maya had fallen asleep on Rachel's couch clutching a slice of leftover cake, Daniel and Rachel stood together on her balcony watching the rain-soaked city glitter below them. "Thank you for tonight," Rachel said quietly, "for being here, for bringing Maya, for making this feel like an actual celebration instead of just marking time. You don't need to thank me for showing up to celebrate you. I do, though, because showing up consistently, even when it's hard or inconvenient, that's love, Daniel. That's what I never had before you." She turned to face him, her expression serious in the dim light. "I need to tell you something I've been thinking about for months but haven't had the courage to say." Daniel felt his pulse quicken. "Okay. I'm in love with you, not falling, not moving toward, actually completely in love with you." The words tumbled out quickly, as if she was afraid of losing her nerve. "And I know it's complicated because of Maya and our history and the fact that we started in crisis. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this might not work long term, but I needed you to know that what I feel for you isn't gratitude or dependence or trauma bonding. It's real love for who you actually are." Daniel felt something tight in his chest loosen and expand. He'd been protecting his heart, keeping part of himself held back because loving someone fully meant risking the kind of devastating loss he'd experienced with Sarah. But standing there with Rachel, this woman who'd fought so hard to stay alive, who loved his daughter, who'd somehow become essential to his daily existence, he realized he'd already fallen completely. The protection had failed months ago. "I love you too," he said, and the admission felt like jumping off a cliff and discovering he could fly. "I've been terrified to say it because the last time I loved someone this much, I lost her. But you're right, this is real. This is the kind of love that changes everything." Rachel's smile was radiant through her tears. "So what do we do now?" "Now we keep building, keep showing up, keep choosing this even when it's scary." Daniel pulled her close, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. "We've both survived impossible things, Rachel. We can survive being happy together." They kissed in the rain-washed air, the city sparkling around them like a promise. Inside, Maya stirred on the couch and called out sleepily, "Daddy, is Rachel staying with us now?" Daniel and Rachel looked at each other, and something passed between them. A decision made without words, a future they were both ready to reach for. "Not tonight, baby," Daniel called back. "But maybe soon." Maya mumbled something that sounded like approval and drifted back to sleep. Rachel laughed softly, her breath warm against Daniel's neck. "Soon," she repeated. "I like the sound of that." The next few months brought the kind of changes that looked small from the outside, but felt monumental to the people living them. Rachel started spending more time at Daniel's modest apartment than at her penthouse, discovering that she preferred the comfortable chaos of his life to the pristine isolation of her own. She learned to navigate Maya's morning routine, to pack school lunches that met kindergarten nutrition standards, to read bedtime stories with the proper dramatic inflection. Maya, for her part, embraced Rachel with the wholehearted acceptance that children give to people who genuinely see them. She started calling Rachel's penthouse our tall house, in contrast to our regular house, as if both spaces belonged equally to their expanding family. She introduced Rachel to her kindergarten teacher as my daddy's special friend who knows everything about computers, a description that made Rachel laugh and cry simultaneously. But it wasn't all smooth integration. There were hard moments, too, times when Daniel's grief for Sarah surfaced unexpectedly and he needed space that Rachel didn't know how to give. Times when Rachel's recovery felt precarious and she withdrew into herself, leaving Daniel uncertain whether to push or wait. Times when Maya acted out, testing the boundaries of this new family structure, needing reassurance that Rachel's presence didn't mean losing her father's attention. One particularly difficult evening in May, Daniel returned from a parent-teacher conference to find Rachel and Maya having what could only be described as a standoff. Maya sat at the kitchen table with her arms crossed, her face set in stubborn lines. Rachel stood by the counter looking lost and frustrated. "What's going on?" Daniel asked carefully. "Maya won't do her homework," Rachel said. "I've been trying to help her for an hour, but she keeps saying she'll wait for you." "Because you're not my real mom," Maya burst out, and the words hung in the air like a grenade. "You can't tell me what to do. Only Daddy can tell me what to do." Daniel saw Rachel flinch as if physically struck. He saw the color drain from her face, saw her hands grip the counter for support, and he saw, beneath the hurt, her immediate understanding of what was really happening. Maya testing, pushing, needing to know if this new person in their lives would stay, even when things got hard. "Maya," Daniel said quietly, kneeling beside her chair. "That was unkind. Rachel was trying to help you." "I don't want her help. I want you." Maya's voice cracked with tears. "What if you love her more than me? What if she makes you forget about Mommy?" And there it was. The fear beneath the anger, the real wound driving the outburst. Daniel pulled Maya into his lap, feeling her small body shake with sobs. "Nothing and nobody will ever make me forget Mommy," he said firmly. "She's part of you, which means she's part of us forever. And loving Rachel doesn't mean I love you less. It means our family has more love in it, not less." "But what if she leaves? What if everyone I love leaves?" Daniel looked at Rachel over Maya's head and saw tears streaming down her face. She mouthed, "I'm sorry," and turned to leave, giving them space. But Daniel shook his head, gesturing for her to stay. "Rachel," he said, "can you tell Maya why you're not going to leave?" Rachel wiped her eyes and knelt beside them, her voice shaking but sincere. "Maya, I can't promise I'll be perfect. I'm going to make mistakes, and sometimes I'll mess up trying to help when maybe I should just listen. But I can promise I'm not going anywhere. I love your daddy, and I love you, and I'm committed to being part of this family for as long as you'll have me. Even when I'm mean to you? Even then. Because families don't leave just because things get hard. They work through hard things together." Rachel hesitated, then added, "And you're right. I'm not your real mom. I would never try to replace her. But maybe I could be something different, someone who loves you and your dad and wants to help make your life better." Maya was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then she slid off Daniel's lap and wrapped her arms around Rachel in a fierce hug. "I'm sorry I was mean. I was scared." "I know, sweetheart. Being scared is okay. Being mean is not okay, but I forgive you." Daniel watched them hold each other and felt his heart expand with something that felt like hope. This was his family now, imperfect, complicated, built from loss and survival and the courage to try again. It looked nothing like the family he'd imagined having with Sarah, but it was real and precious and worth fighting for. Later that night, after Maya was asleep and Rachel was preparing to return to her penthouse, she stopped Daniel at the door. What Maya said earlier about not being her real mom, it hurt, but she wasn't wrong. I'm not her mother. I'm never going to be Sarah. And I need to know that you're okay with that you're not expecting me to fill some void I can never actually fill. Daniel cupped her face in his hands. "I don't want you to be Sarah. I want you to be Rachel. the woman I fell in love with, who has her own relationship with Maya that's different from what Sarah would have had. We're not trying to recreate what I lost. We're building something new. And if I mess it up, if I'm terrible at the stepmother thing, then you'll mess it up and we'll figure it out together. That's what families do. They survive each other's mistakes and keep trying anyway. Rachel leaned into him, and Daniel held her, both of them drawing strength from the contact. They were navigating uncharted territory, learning how to blend their lives without erasing the past or pretending the challenges didn't exist. It was harder than either of them had expected, but also somehow more rewarding. As spring turned to summer, they found their rhythm. Rachel started staying over more nights than not, her presence in the apartment becoming familiar rather than novel. She contributed to grocery bills and utility costs despite Daniel's protests, insisting that if she was going to live there part-time, she needed to contribute equally. They negotiated responsibilities. Daniel handled Maya's school stuff and medical appointments since he had more experience, while Rachel took over planning weekend activities and teaching Maya about technology. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of friction, still times when the complexity of blending their lives felt overwhelming. But there were also moments of unexpected joy. Sunday morning breakfast with all three of them cooking together, Maya's delighted laughter when Rachel beat them both at video games, quiet evenings when they'd sit together on the couch and simply exist in each other's company. In July, Rachel made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She announced at a board meeting that she was stepping back from day-to-day operations of her company, transitioning to a chairman role that would give her more time for her personal life. The business press speculated wildly about her reasons: illness, burnout, loss of passion for the work. Only a few people knew the real truth. Rachel had decided that being present for her life mattered more than optimizing her quarterly earnings. "They think I'm crazy," she told Daniel the night after the announcement went public. "My board thinks I'm throwing away my legacy. The tech blogs are writing think pieces about whether I've lost my edge." "What do you think?" Daniel asked. Rachel looked around his apartment, at Maya's artwork covering the refrigerator, at the family photo they'd taken at the beach last weekend, at the life they were building together in this space that held none of her wealth, but all of her happiness. "I think I'm finally learning what actually matters," she said. "And it's not being on magazine covers or maximizing shareholder value. It's this: being here for dinner, helping Maya with homework, having time to actually live instead of just work." "No regrets?" "The only thing I regret is not doing this sooner. All those years I spent chasing success, and I never stopped to ask what success was actually for." She smiled. "Now I know. Success is having people you love and time to love them." Daniel pulled her close, proud of her courage in choosing a different path. It was easier to keep grinding, keep performing, keep hiding behind work. It took real bravery to step back and admit that you wanted something different from life. That summer brought another milestone, Maya's 6th birthday, which she insisted on celebrating with all my favorite people together. The party was held at a park, a hybrid of Daniel's modest budget and Rachel's desire to make it special. There were dinosaur decorations everywhere, a bounce house, and a cake shaped like a T-Rex that Rachel had somehow convinced a high-end bakery to create. Daniel watched Rachel organize games and hand out party favors and interact with the other kindergarten parents as if she'd been part of this community forever. Nobody treated her like a celebrity or a billionaire. They treated her like Maya's stepmom in progress, someone who belonged because she clearly cared. At one point, Maya's best friend's mother pulled Daniel aside. "Your girlfriend is lovely. Maya talks about her constantly." "Rachel's pretty great," Daniel agreed. "Are you two thinking about making it official? Getting married?" The question caught Daniel off guard. He and Rachel had been together for 8 months, living together part-time for 3. They'd said, "I love you," and built a life and integrated their families. But marriage felt like a step he wasn't sure he was ready for. Not because he didn't want forever with Rachel, but because marriage meant confronting all the complicated feelings he still carried about losing Sarah. "We haven't really discussed it," he said carefully. "Well, whenever you do, I think you should know that Maya told the whole class that Rachel is going to be her new mom, who used to be sad but now is happy because they found each other. It was the sweetest thing." She smiled. That kid has a gift for understanding what really matters. Daniel found himself thinking about that conversation for days afterward. Did he want to marry Rachel? The question felt loaded with complexity, not about Rachel herself, but about what it meant to choose a new partner, to build a new marriage, when the first one had ended in tragedy. He was still processing when Rachel brought it up herself, late one night after Maya was asleep. They were curled together on the couch, the television playing some show neither of them was watching. "Can I ask you something?" Rachel said. "And I need you to be completely honest, even if the answer is hard to hear." "Always." "Do you see a future with me? Not just right now, but long term. Marriage, maybe more kids, growing old together, all of it." Daniel felt his chest tighten. "Where's this coming from?" "From the fact that I'm 33 and you're 31, and we're clearly building something serious. From the fact that Maya's starting to call me her stepmom to her friends, even though legally I'm nothing to her. From the fact that I love you both so much it terrifies me, and I need to know if you're in this for real or if I'm just the person who helped you get over Sarah." The last part came out wounded, vulnerable, and Daniel realized she'd been carrying this fear for months without voicing it. "You're not a rebound," he said firmly. "You're not some transitional person I'm using to heal from my loss. You're the woman I love, the person I want to build a life with, He stopped, surprised by what he was about to say. "The person I want to marry." Rachel's breath caught. "Really?" "Yeah, really. I've been scared to even think about it because marriage feels like this huge statement, and what if I mess it up, or what if something terrible happens again? But the truth is, I want forever with you, Rachel. I want to make this official. I want Maya to know that you're not going anywhere, that we're a real family, that—" Rachel kissed him before he could finish, and when they finally broke apart, they were both crying and laughing and holding each other like they'd discovered something precious. "Was that a proposal?" Rachel asked. "Because if so, it was pretty terrible. Very unromantic. No ring, no planning, just word vomit on your couch." "It was definitely terrible," Daniel agreed. "Want me to try again properly?" "No, I want exactly this, messy and imperfect and real. That's us. That's what we do." She grinned through her tears. "But I'm saying yes anyway, in case that wasn't clear." They told Maya the next morning over pancakes. She processed the information with her characteristic 6-year-old directness. "So Rachel's going to be my stepmom for real? Like legally?" "Yes," Daniel confirmed. "If that's okay with you." Maya considered this seriously. "Will she live with us all the time? Not just some nights?" "We'd have to figure that out. Maybe we'd split time between here and Rachel's penthouse, or maybe we'd find a new place that's ours together." "Can I have my own room wherever we live, with a door I can close?" "Of course." "And Rachel still has to teach me computer stuff like she promised." Rachel laughed. "Definitely. That's a lifetime commitment." "Okay then. I think it's good." Maya took another bite of pancakes, then added, "Daddy, does this mean I'll have a mom again? Not the same mom as before, but a new kind of mom?" Daniel looked at Rachel, seeing the hope and fear warring in her expression. They'd been so careful about labels, so conscious of not trying to replace Sarah. But Maya was asking for something different, not a replacement, but an addition. "What do you think, sweetheart?" Daniel asked. "Would you want that?" Maya turned to Rachel with serious eyes. "Would you want to be my mom? The kind who comes to school stuff and knows my friends and helps with homework and tucks me in?" Rachel's voice was thick with emotion. "I would love that, Maya, more than anything." "Then yes, you can be my new mom who's also Rachel." She returned to her breakfast as if this wasn't a monumental declaration. "Can we get a dog now? New families get dogs." Daniel and Rachel locked eyes and started laughing. At Maya's logic, at the casual way she'd just redefined their family, at the beautiful absurdity of this moment. They were really doing this. They were becoming a family, officially and intentionally, built from the wreckage of loss and the courage to try again. The engagement period was short. They were both older, both certain, both aware that long engagement served no purpose when you'd already built a life together. They planned a small ceremony for late September, just 18 months after Daniel had found Rachel dying in her penthouse. The guest list was intimate. Rachel's support group, Daniel's closest friends, Maya in a dress she'd picked out herself, and a few colleagues from both their worlds. But planning even a small wedding revealed tensions neither had anticipated. Rachel wanted to contribute financially, but Daniel bristled at the idea of her paying for everything. They compromised awkwardly, splitting costs in ways that satisfied nobody, but at least acknowledged both their concerns. Then there was the question of where to live after the wedding. Daniel's apartment was too small for 3 people long term, but Rachel's penthouse felt like it belonged to her old life rather than their shared future. 2 weeks before the wedding, they had their first real fight. It started with something small, Rachel suggesting they hire help for housework and Daniel refusing because he didn't want to raise Maya in an environment where paid staff did everything. But underneath was the larger issue they'd been dancing around for months: how to bridge the gap between their vastly different financial situations without making Daniel feel like he was being taken care of or making Rachel feel like she couldn't contribute. "I have money," Rachel said, her voice tight with frustration. "A lot of money. And I want to use it to make our lives easier, to give Maya opportunities, to not have you working yourself into exhaustion just to prove you can provide." "I don't need you to provide for me," Daniel shot back. "I've been taking care of Maya just fine for 6 years. I don't need rescuing." "This isn't about rescuing. This is about being partners, about sharing resources, about letting me be part of this family financially as well as emotionally. And what happens if things don't work out? What happens if we get divorced and I've gotten used to your money and your lifestyle and then suddenly I can't afford any of it? What happens to Maya then?" The words hung in the air, ugly and revealing. Rachel's face went pale. "Is that what you think? That this is temporary? That we're going to fail?" Daniel ran his hands through his hair, frustrated with himself. "No, I don't think that. But I watched my parents' marriage fall apart over money, over my dad feeling like he could never measure up to what my mom earned. I don't want to become that guy who resents his wife's success." Rachel sat down heavily on the couch. "And I don't want to spend my life apologizing for having money or hiding what I can offer because it makes you uncomfortable. I worked hard for what I have, Daniel. It's part of who I am. If we're going to make this marriage work, you need to accept all of me, including the parts that come with wealth." They sat in tense silence, the fight hanging between them unresolved. Finally, Maya emerged from her room where she'd been pretending not to hear them arguing. "Are you fighting about being rich and not rich?" she asked with typical 6-year-old bluntness. "Sort of," Daniel admitted. "That's silly. Rachel's money doesn't make her better or worse. It just means she has more numbers in her bank account." Maya climbed onto the couch between them. "Daddy, you're good at taking care of me with not much money. Rachel's good at taking care of businesses with lots of money. Together you can take care of all of us with medium money. That's called compromise." Daniel and Rachel stared at her, then at each other, then started laughing at the absurd wisdom coming from their 6-year-old mediator. "When did you get so smart?" Rachel asked. "I've always been this smart. Adults just forget to listen to kids." They worked it out over the next few days, finding compromises that honored both their concerns. Yes, they'd hire some household help, but only for tasks that genuinely made sense to outsource. Yes, Rachel would contribute more financially to their household, but they'd maintain separate accounts plus a shared one for family expenses. Yes, they'd eventually move to a bigger place, but they'd choose it together based on what felt right for their family rather than what Rachel could afford. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And honesty, they were learning, was the foundation of everything they were building. The wedding took place on a perfect September afternoon in a small garden venue that felt intimate and warm. Maya served as both ring bearer and flower girl, taking her duties so seriously that several guests had to stifle laughter at her stern concentration. Rachel wore a simple dress that made her look radiant, and Daniel wore a suit that Maya had helped him pick out. When it came time for vows, Rachel spoke first, her voice steady despite her tears. "Daniel, you saved my life by refusing to let me die alone. But more than that, you taught me that being saved isn't the same as being healed, that I had to do the hard work myself, but I didn't have to do it alone. You showed me that strength isn't never falling down, it's getting back up every single time. You gave me a reason to fight when I'd stopped believing I was worth fighting for. And you gave me Maya, this incredible human who's taught me more about love and courage than I knew existed. I promise to show up for you both, to be honest even when it's hard, to keep fighting for our family every single day. I promise to be the partner you deserve and the mother Maya needs. I promise to build a life with you that's messy and imperfect and real, because that's the only kind of life worth living. Daniel had to wipe his eyes before he could speak, his voice rough with emotion. Rachel, when I met you, I was surviving but not really living. I'd convinced myself that being a good father meant sacrificing everything else, that I didn't deserve to want more than just getting through each day. You reminded me that I'm allowed to be more than just Maya's dad. I'm allowed to be someone who loves and is loved, who builds a future instead of just protecting against loss. You've been brave enough to let me see you at your absolute worst and vulnerable enough to let me help you become your best. You've loved my daughter like she's yours and honored my late wife's memory while building something new with me. I promise to support your recovery every day for the rest of our lives. I promise to be patient when things are hard and present when you need me. I promise to build a family with you that honors where we've been while embracing where we're going. And I promise that choosing you doesn't mean forgetting Sarah. It means learning that the heart has infinite capacity for love when we're brave enough to use it. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden as they exchanged rings and kissed as husband and wife. Maya cheered loudly, clearly proud of her role in bringing them together. At the small reception afterward, Daniel's neighbor Sophie pulled him aside. I never thought I'd see you this happy again, she said. After Sarah died, I worried you'd spend the rest of your life just going through the motions. But look at you now, actually living. Rachel gave me that, Daniel said, watching his new wife teach Maya how to dance. She gave me permission to want more than just survival. You gave each other that, Sophie corrected. You both survived impossible things and found each other on the other side. That's not luck, that's courage. As the evening wound down and Maya fell asleep on Rachel's shoulder from exhaustion and excitement, Daniel felt something settle in his chest that he hadn't felt since before Sarah died. Complete peace. Not the absence of grief or fear or uncertainty, but the presence of something stronger, a family built on honesty and survival, and the courage to keep trying. Rachel caught him watching them and smiled, her expression full of love and hope and hard-won joy. What are you thinking? She asked quietly, careful not to wake Maya. That we did it. We actually made it to the other side. The other side of what? Of dying, of addiction, of grief, of all the impossible things we survived to get here. Daniel moved closer, wrapping his arms around both of them. We built something real from the wreckage, Rachel. That's everything. Rachel kissed him softly, Maya still sleeping between them, their family complete in this perfect moment. Yeah, she whispered. That's everything. The honeymoon phase ended exactly 3 weeks after the wedding when Rachel came home from a board meeting looking like she'd been physically struck. Daniel was in the kitchen helping Maya with a science project about volcanoes, an endeavor that had resulted in baking soda coating most of the counter, when Rachel walked through the door with a face drained of all color. What happened? Daniel asked immediately, his protective instincts firing. Maya looked up from her papier-mâché mountain, sensing the tension. Rachel set down her bag with hands that trembled visibly. The board voted to oust me completely, not just from day-to-day operations, from everything. They're offering a buyout package and asking me to resign from the company I built. The words landed like bombs in the quiet kitchen. Daniel moved to her side, but Rachel held up a hand, needing space to process before accepting comfort. They said my stepping back showed a lack of commitment, that the company needs leadership that prioritizes growth over personal matters, that I've become a liability rather than an asset. Her voice was flat, shock evident in every word. 10 years of my life, billions of dollars in value I created, and they're pushing me out like I'm dead weight. Maya abandoned her volcano and hugged Rachel's leg fiercely. That's mean. You should tell them they're fired instead. Despite everything, Rachel managed a broken laugh. That's not how it works, sweetheart, but I appreciate the sentiment. Daniel ushered Maya back to her project, then guided Rachel to the couch where they could talk without small ears absorbing every word. She sat rigid, her body language screaming trauma even as she tried to maintain composure. What do you want to do? Daniel asked carefully. Fight them? Accept the buyout? Burn the whole company to the ground? I don't know. I've spent all day trying to figure out if I even care. Rachel's hands twisted in her lap. Part of me is devastated. That's my company, my legacy, my entire adult life wrapped up in something they're trying to take away. But another part of me feels almost relieved, like they're giving me permission to walk away from something I've been holding on to out of obligation rather than passion. Those can both be true. You can grieve losing your company and still recognize that maybe it's time to move on. Rachel looked at him with eyes that held too much pain. What if they're right, though? What if I have become a liability? What if choosing recovery and family over constant hustle means I'm not cut out for this world anymore? Then maybe it's not a world worth being cut out for, Daniel said firmly. You built an empire, Rachel. You proved everything you needed to prove. If they can't see that taking care of your mental health and building a family makes you stronger rather than weaker, that's their failure of vision, not yours. But what do I do now? I've been Rachel Monroe, tech CEO, for so long I don't know who I am without that identity. What am I if I'm not running a company? Maya appeared beside them, apparently done with giving them privacy. You're Rachel who helps me with homework and makes funny faces when cooking goes wrong and knows all the computer stuff and is my mom now. That's who you are. Rachel pulled Maya into her lap, burying her face in her daughter's hair. Daniel watched them hold each other and felt a fierce surge of protectiveness for both of them, his family, his responsibility to shield from whatever came next. Over the following days, the full scope of the board's betrayal became clear. They'd been planning this for months, lining up votes and preparing documentation, just waiting for the right moment to strike. Rachel had walked into that meeting thinking she was still chairman, still valued, still essential to the company she'd built from nothing. She'd walked out effectively fired from her own creation. The business press had a field day. Articles dissected her downfall with the gleeful cruelty of people who loved watching successful women stumble. Think pieces debated whether her stepping back had been the beginning of her end, whether personal happiness was compatible with business success, whether she'd lost her edge or simply lost interest. Some were sympathetic, most were not. All of them treated her like a cautionary tale rather than a human being navigating complex choices. Daniel watched Rachel scroll through the coverage with an expression that broke his heart. Not anger, not even sadness, just a kind of weary resignation that this was how her story would be told. They're writing about me like I'm already dead, she said one night, her phone casting blue light across her face in the darkness. Like my relevance ended the moment I stopped being useful to them. Then prove them wrong. Not by going back and fighting for a company that doesn't deserve you, but by building something new, something that actually matters to you. Like what? I don't know how to do anything else. Tech is all I've ever known. Daniel thought about his own reinvention after Sarah died, how he'd walked away from architecture and discovered that there were other ways to build a meaningful life. You don't have to know right now. You just have to be willing to explore what comes next. Rachel set down her phone and turned to face him in the dark. Are you disappointed in me? For not fighting harder to keep what I built? No. I'm proud of you for recognizing when something isn't serving you anymore. He pulled her close, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. And I'm grateful you chose us over a company that didn't value you properly. That takes more courage than fighting would have. It doesn't feel courageous. It feels like I'm running away. Sometimes running away from the wrong thing is the bravest choice you can make. The buyout package, when finalized, was astronomical. Enough money that Rachel would never need to work again. Enough to secure Maya's future through college and beyond. Enough to make Daniel's head spin when he saw the actual numbers. But money, they were both learning, couldn't fix everything. It couldn't restore Rachel's sense of purpose or erase the feeling that she'd been discarded by people she'd trusted. Depression crept in slowly over the following weeks. Not the dramatic kind that announced itself, but the quiet kind that manifested as Rachel sleeping later each morning, losing interest in activities she'd previously enjoyed, withdrawing into herself even when physically present. Daniel recognized the signs. He'd lived through his own version after Sarah died, but knowing what was happening didn't make it easier to fight. I'm fine, Rachel insisted when he tried to talk to her about it. Just tired, adjusting to not working is harder than I expected. You're not fine, you're struggling, and that's okay, but we need to address it. I'm not using. I go to my meetings. I see my therapist. I'm doing everything right. Depression isn't about doing things wrong, Rachel. It's a legitimate response to trauma, and losing your company was traumatic. whether you want to admit it or not. She looked at him with eyes that held too much exhaustion. What do you want me to do, Daniel? Fall apart completely? Have a breakdown? I'm holding it together as well as I can. I want you to stop pretending you're fine when you're not. I want you to let me help instead of pushing me away. I want you to remember that asking for support isn't the same as being weak. I'm so tired of needing support, Rachel said, her voice breaking. I'm tired of being the person who's always struggling, always needing saving, always on the edge of falling apart. When do I get to be strong? When do I get to be the one helping instead of always being helped? The pain in her voice was visceral. Daniel realized she'd been carrying this weight for months, maybe longer. The belief that accepting help meant she was perpetually broken, perpetually less than, perpetually the patient instead of the partner. You help me every day, he said quietly. You help Maya every day. You help people in your support group who are earlier in recovery. Needing help sometimes doesn't erase the help you give. They exist simultaneously. I don't feel helpful. I feel like a burden you're both stuck with. Rachel, look at me. Daniel waited until she met his eyes. You are not a burden. You are my wife. You are Maya's mother. You are a person I chose to build a life with, not someone I'm obligated to tolerate. If you're struggling right now, we deal with it together. The same way you've dealt with my struggles, my grief, my fears about being a good enough father. You never seem to struggle like this. You always seem to have it together. That's not true. I struggle all the time. I just hide it better because I've had more practice. He took her hands. Last week I had a panic attack at the grocery store because Maya wanted the same cereal Sarah used to buy. 2 weeks ago I cried in the shower because I realized Maya is starting to forget what Sarah looked like without the pictures. I struggle, Rachel. I just don't always show it. Rachel's expression shifted, some of the isolation in her eyes easing. You never told me about the panic attack. Because I was embarrassed. Because I thought I should be past that grief by now. Because I didn't want to burden you when you're dealing with your own stuff. He squeezed her hands. But that's exactly what you're doing right now. Hiding your pain because you think you should be past it. Because you don't want to burden me. We're both doing the same broken thing. So what do? We stop hiding. We tell each other the truth even when it's ugly. We accept that healing isn't linear and struggling doesn't mean failing. He paused. And you make an appointment with your doctor about the depression because sometimes the brain needs chemical help to get back to functioning properly. Rachel nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. I'm scared, Daniel. Not about relapsing. I'm past that fear. I'm scared that without my company, without my identity as this successful businesswoman, I'm just nobody. I'm scared I'll spend the rest of my life drifting, purposeless, taking up space without contributing anything meaningful. Then we find you a new purpose. Not right away, not until you're ready, but eventually we figure out what comes next, together. The conversation marked a turning point. Rachel stopped pretending to be fine and started being honest about her struggles. She increased her therapy sessions and agreed to try medication for the depression, a decision that came with its own complications given her history with substances, but one her treatment team felt was necessary. She started journaling again, processing her feelings on paper when they felt too overwhelming to speak aloud. And slowly, over weeks and then months, she started to emerge from the darkness. Not all at once, not in some dramatic recovery montage, but in small increments that accumulated into genuine healing. She started taking walks in the mornings, the physical movement helping clear some of the mental fog. She reconnected with old friends from college, people who'd known her before she became Rachel Monroe, tech mogul. She began volunteering at a local community center, teaching computer skills to low-income kids who reminded her why she'd fallen in love with technology in the first place. Maya was the one who suggested the next step during a family dinner in late November. They'd been discussing what they were grateful for, a Thanksgiving tradition Daniel had maintained from his own childhood, and Maya had listed off her standard items: dinosaurs, her best friend Emma, the fact that volcanoes were still erupting somewhere. And I'm grateful Rachel teaches me computer stuff, Maya added, spearing a piece of broccoli with her fork. She's the best teacher. She should teach more kids, not just me. Rachel looked up from her plate, something sparking in her eyes that Daniel recognized as the first glimmer of genuine interest he'd seen in weeks. What do you mean, sweetheart? I mean, you make computers fun. Most grown-ups make learning boring, but you make it like an adventure. More kids should get to learn from you. Maya said it with the casual confidence of someone who didn't realize she'd just planted a seed that would grow into something significant. That night, after Maya was asleep, Rachel brought it up again. Do you think she's right, that I could teach? I think you'd be incredible at it. You have the knowledge, the patience, the ability to break down complex concepts into understandable pieces. Daniel could see her mind working, processing possibilities. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about all those kids at the community center, how hungry they are to learn, but how limited their access to technology education is. I'm thinking about how much money I have sitting in accounts doing nothing useful. I'm thinking... She stopped, the idea clearly still forming. What if I started a nonprofit, a program that teaches coding and computer skills to underserved communities? Not just kids, adults too. People who've been left behind by the digital revolution and need skills to compete in the modern economy. Daniel watched her transform as she spoke, animation returning to her face, her hands gesturing enthusiastically the way they did when she was excited about something. This was the Rachel he'd fallen in love with, passionate, purposeful, driven by something larger than herself. I think it's brilliant, he said honestly. I think it's exactly the kind of meaningful work you've been searching for. It wouldn't make me rich. Actually, it would cost me money. A lot of money. You have a lot of money to spend, and you'd be investing it in something that actually changes lives, rather than just generating more wealth you don't need. Rachel's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Do you really think I could do this? Build something new that's not about profit or market share, just about helping people. I know you can. You built a tech empire from nothing. Building something that matters to you will be even easier because you'll actually care about the outcome. The nonprofit, eventually named CodeBridge after many brainstorming sessions, and Maya's insistence that it needed a cool bridge name because it helps people cross over to computer knowledge, became Rachel's new focus over the winter months. She threw herself into the planning with the same intensity she'd once brought to her company, but this time tempered by the wisdom of her recovery and the understanding that sustainable passion looked different than destructive obsession. Daniel watched her come alive in a way that went beyond her previous success. She wasn't building CodeBridge to prove anything to anyone or to silence her critics. She was building it because it mattered to her, because teaching felt meaningful in ways that quarterly earnings never had, because making technology accessible to people who'd been excluded from its benefits aligned with values she'd discovered through her own struggles. By spring, CodeBridge had secured a location, a renovated warehouse in a lower-income neighborhood, and begun recruiting volunteer instructors and students. Rachel designed the curriculum herself, drawing on her years in tech but translating it into accessible language that didn't assume prior knowledge or expensive equipment. Classes were free, computers were provided, and childcare was available so parents could attend without leaving their kids home alone. The first cohort of students was small, 15 people ranging from teenagers to a grandmother in her 70s who wanted to learn to video chat with her grandchildren. Rachel was terrified before that first class, convinced she'd be terrible at teaching, worried that people would see through her to the struggling addict beneath the competent exterior. Daniel and Maya came to watch from the back of the room, offering moral support. They watched Rachel introduce herself not as a former tech CEO or a reformed addict, but simply as someone who loved computers and wanted to share that love with others. They watched her work patiently with a teenager who couldn't understand basic functions, celebrating his small victories with genuine enthusiasm. They watched her help the grandmother navigate email for the first time, the older woman's face lighting up when she successfully sent her first message. After class, as students filtered out thanking Rachel profusely, Maya ran up to hug her legs. "You were amazing! You made computers look so fun!" "I was so nervous," Rachel admitted, still riding the adrenaline high. "My hands were shaking the whole time." "Nobody could tell," Daniel assured her. "You were natural. This is clearly what you're supposed to be doing." Rachel looked around the warehouse space, still rough around the edges, still being renovated, but already feeling purposeful in a way her sleek corporate offices never had. "I think you might be right. For the first time since I lost my company, I feel like myself again. Not the old self who measured success in stock prices, but a new self who measures it in how many people I help understand technology. That's because this matters in ways that transcend ego or external validation, Daniel said. You're not doing this for recognition, you're doing it because it's right. The success of CodeBridge's first cohort led to a second, then a third. Word spread through the community about the free computer classes taught by the former tech CEO who actually cared about her students. Local news picked up the story, positioning it as a redemption arc. Rachel Monroe reinventing herself as an educator after being pushed out of her company. Rachel hated the framing but appreciated the publicity because it brought more students and volunteer instructors. By summer, CodeBridge had expanded to offer evening classes for working adults and weekend sessions for kids Maya's age. Rachel hired staff, people from the community who understood the barriers their students faced, and began planning to open a second location. The nonprofit was growing, but in a sustainable way that prioritized impact over expansion. One evening in July, almost 2 years after Daniel had found Rachel dying in her penthouse, they sat together on the balcony of their new home, a compromise between his modest apartment and her penthouse, a house in a quiet neighborhood with a yard for Maya, and space for all of them to breathe. Maya was inside, supposedly asleep but probably reading under her covers with a flashlight. "I've been thinking about something," Rachel said, her hand finding his in the darkness. "About the night you found my pipe in the trash. Do you remember what I said to you? You asked what it was like to be dying while everyone tells you you're fine. And you said the worst kind of dying is the kind nobody else can see." Rachel turned to face him. "I was dying, Daniel. Not metaphorically, actually dying. Another few months and I would have overdosed, or my heart would have given out, or I would have just stopped caring enough to keep breathing. You saved my life by seeing what nobody else bothered to look for. You saved your own life by being brave enough to accept help. We saved each other," Rachel corrected. "You were dying too, in your own way. Surviving but not living, going through motions but not finding joy, being a good father but forgetting you were also allowed to be a whole person. I gave you permission to want more. You gave me the courage to fight for it." Daniel pulled her close, feeling the truth of her words settle into his bones. They had saved each other, not in some dramatic rescue fantasy, but in the quiet, sustained way that real salvation worked. By showing up, by refusing to walk away, by believing each other was worth the effort even when everything felt impossible. "Do you ever regret it?" Rachel asked quietly. "Taking on someone as complicated as me? You could have had a much easier life with someone who didn't come with addiction and trauma, and a very public failure." "Never. Not once." Daniel meant it with every fiber of his being. "You make me better, Rachel. You make our life richer. Whatever complications you brought, they're nothing compared to what you've given us. I feel the same way about you and Maya. You've given me a family I never thought I'd have, a purpose beyond just accumulating wealth, a reason to stay alive that has nothing to do with achievement or recognition." She paused, then added softly, "I'm happy, Daniel. Actually, genuinely happy in a way I've never been before." Is that allowed? Can someone who was an addict, who lost their company, who struggled so much just be happy now? That's exactly when you're allowed to be happy. After the struggle, after the fighting, after learning who you actually are instead of who you thought you should be. He kissed her temple. "You've earned this happiness, Rachel. Stop questioning whether you deserve it." They sat in comfortable silence, the summer night warm around them, the house behind them holding the life they'd built together from wreckage and hope and stubborn refusal to give up. Inside, Maya's reading light clicked off. She'd finally surrendered to sleep. In the distance, the city hummed with its endless activity. And here, in this pocket of peace they'd carved out for themselves, two people who'd been dying in different ways sat together, alive and healing and home. The doorbell rang unexpectedly, breaking their quiet moment. Daniel frowned. They weren't expecting anyone, and it was past 9. Rachel tensed beside him, old instincts from her using days making her wary of unexpected visitors. Daniel answered the door to find a woman he didn't recognize, mid-50s, professionally dressed, carrying a leather portfolio. "Daniel Brooks? I'm Janet Chen, attorney. I'm sorry to arrive unannounced, but I have urgent business regarding Rachel Monroe." Rachel appeared behind Daniel, her face carefully neutral. What kind of urgent business? Janet looked between them, clearly assessing whether to speak freely. May I come in? This isn't a conversation for doorsteps. They led her to the living room, both of them tense with anticipation. Janet settled on the couch and pulled documents from her portfolio with practiced efficiency. I represent a coalition of minority shareholders from your former company, Janet began without preamble. They've been investigating the circumstances of your departure and have uncovered significant irregularities. The board's vote to remove you was based on falsified information about the company's performance and your leadership effectiveness. In short, Miss Monroe, you were the victim of a coordinated effort to devalue your contributions and justify your removal. Rachel's face had gone pale. What are you saying? I'm saying you have grounds to sue for wrongful termination, defamation, and breach of fiduciary duty. The case is strong. We have documents, emails, testimony from employees who were pressured to provide negative feedback about your leadership. If you choose to proceed, we could not only restore your position, but secure significant damages for the harm done to your reputation. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Daniel watched Rachel process the information, saw the conflict playing across her face, vindication warring with exhaustion, anger fighting with peace. What do you want to do? He asked quietly. Rachel looked at the documents Janet had spread across their coffee table, then at Daniel, then toward the stairs where Maya slept peacefully. Can I think about it? This isn't a decision I can make right now. Of course. Take a week. But Ms. Monroe, I need you to understand, this is your chance to reclaim what was taken from you, to prove you weren't the liability they claimed, to show the world they were wrong about you. After Janet left, Rachel and Daniel stood in the living room surrounded by the evidence of her former colleague's betrayal. Rachel picked up one of the documents, scanning it with growing anger. They lied, she said, her voice tight. They systematically lied about my performance, about the company's direction, about everything. And I believed them. I thought maybe they were right, maybe I had become a liability. You weren't. They just wanted you gone so they could run things their way. I should sue them. I should take them to court and destroy them the way they tried to destroy me. Rachel's hands were shaking with rage. I should make them pay for what they did. You could do that, Daniel agreed. Or you could let it go and keep building the life you actually want instead of fighting for one you've already moved past. Rachel looked at him sharply. You think I should just let them get away with it? I think you should consider what fighting will cost you. Lawsuits take years. They consume energy and attention. They keep you focused on the past instead of building the future. And at the end, even if you win, what do you actually get? Your old job back at a company that betrayed you? Money you don't need? Vindication from people whose opinions shouldn't matter? So I just let them win? No. You've already won by building something better without them, by discovering that your worth isn't tied to their validation, by creating impact through CodeBridge that matters more than anything you did at that company. Daniel moved closer, taking her hands. But this is your choice, Rachel. If you need to fight this battle to feel whole, I'll support you. I just want you to be clear about what you're fighting for and whether it's worth what you'll have to sacrifice to win. Rachel stood there holding the documents that could give her back everything she'd lost, or at least the corporate version of it. Then she thought about her morning classes, about the grandmother who'd finally learned to video chat with her grandchildren, about the teenager who'd discovered a passion for coding, about Maya upstairs sleeping peacefully in a home that felt nothing like Rachel's old penthouse, but felt infinitely more like home. She thought about the person she'd been 2 years ago, driven, successful, dying, and the person she was now, peaceful, purposeful, alive. Slowly, deliberately, Rachel set down the documents. I don't want it back. Any of it. The company, the fight, the vindication, none of it matters anymore. They can keep what they stole because I don't want it. She looked at Daniel with clear eyes. I've spent 2 years learning to live without that identity. I'm not going back to it now, even if I could. Are you sure? I'm sure. Let them have their company, and their lies, and their belief that they won. I got something better. I got my life back. That's the only victory that matters. Daniel pulled her close, proud of her courage in choosing peace over vindication. What are you going to tell the attorney? that I'm declining to pursue legal action, that I've moved on and they should too, that some battles aren't worth fighting, even when you'd win, because the cost of fighting is higher than the prize. Rachel smiled against his chest. And then I'm going to keep teaching my classes and building Code Bridge and being present for my family. That's my revenge, living well. When Rachel called Janet the next day to decline representation, the attorney was clearly disappointed but professional. Are you certain, Ms. Monroe? This is a winnable case. I'm certain, but I appreciate you bringing it to my attention. It helps to know I was right about what happened, even if I'm choosing not to fight it. For what it's worth, I think you're making a wise choice. Litigation is brutal, especially for someone in recovery. Protect your peace. That matters more than corporate justice. The conversation left Rachel feeling lighter than she had in months. She'd been given the opportunity to reclaim her old life and had consciously chosen her new one instead. That choice felt powerful in a way that winning a lawsuit never could. That weekend, Code Bridge celebrated its first graduating class. 15 students who'd completed the full curriculum and were now equipped with job-ready computer skills. Rachel had arranged for local employers to attend, resulting in 3 students receiving job offers on the spot. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, each graduate sharing how the program had changed their trajectory. The grandmother stood up and spoke through tears about video chatting with her grandson for the first time, seeing his face as they talked instead of just hearing his voice. The teenager talked about discovering a passion for coding he never knew existed, about planning to study computer science in college because of what he'd learned at Code Bridge. A single mother in her 30s spoke about landing a job in tech support that would double her previous income, finally able to provide stability for her kids. Daniel watched Rachel beam with pride from the side of the room, Maya sitting beside her taking pictures on the tablet Rachel had taught her to use. This was success that mattered, not stock prices or market share, but actual human lives improved by the work Rachel was doing. After the ceremony, as they cleaned up the space, Maya tugged on Rachel's sleeve. "Mom, are you happy?" It was the first time Maya had called her mom without any qualifiers, not new mom or Rachel mom, just mom. Rachel knelt down to eye level with her stepdaughter, emotion thick in her throat. "I'm very happy, sweetheart. Why do you ask?" "Because you smile now like you did at the wedding, like you're happy inside, not just pretending to be happy outside." Maya's observation was delivered with typical 6-year-old directness. "Daddy said you were sad for a while after your mean company fired you, but you're not sad anymore, right?" "No, baby. I'm not sad anymore. I was sad for a while, but I'm better now. Thank you for noticing." Maya hugged her fiercely. "Good. Because families should be happy together. That's the rule." Daniel joined them, wrapping his arms around both his girls. "That is indeed the rule, and I think we're doing pretty well at following it." They drove home as the sun set over Los Angeles, the city painted in shades of gold and pink, and Rachel felt something she'd never experienced during her years of corporate success. Genuine contentment. Not the adrenaline rush of closing a deal or the satisfaction of beating competitors, but the quiet, steady joy of knowing she was exactly where she belonged, doing exactly what mattered, with exactly the people who made her life worth living. That night, after Maya was asleep and the house was quiet, Rachel and Daniel lay in bed talking about the future, about expanding Code Bridge to serve more communities, about Maya starting first grade in the fall, about ordinary plans for an extraordinary life they'd built from the wreckage of their pasts. "Do you ever think about how unlikely this all was?" Rachel asked. "That you happened to be my janitor, that you happened to care enough to notice, that I happened to be desperate enough to accept help. All the small coincidences that had to align for us to end up here." "I don't think they were coincidences," Daniel said. "I think we found each other because we both needed exactly what the other person could give. You needed someone who saw past your success to your suffering. I needed someone who reminded me I was allowed to want more than just survival." "So you think it was fate? Destiny?" "I think it was need meeting courage at exactly the right moment. You needed help. I was willing to give it. Neither of us walked away when things got hard. That's not fate. That's choice. Every single day, we chose this." Rachel turned to face him in the darkness. "And will you keep choosing this? Even when things get hard again? Because they will, Daniel. I'll have bad days. I'll struggle with my recovery. I'll make mistakes as a mother and a wife and a human being. I'll keep choosing this, Daniel promised, because the hard days don't scare me anymore. We've already survived impossible things. Whatever comes next, we can handle it together. Together, Rachel echoed, and the word felt like a promise, like a prayer, like everything they'd fought so hard to build. Outside their window, Los Angeles continued its endless hum. Millions of people living their separate lives, most of them never knowing about the quiet miracle happening in this one house where two broken people had found each other and built something whole. Where a man who'd lost everything had learned to risk loving again. Where a woman who'd been dying had fought her way back to life. Where a little girl who'd never known her birth mother had found someone who chose to love her anyway. They'd taken the wreckage of their separate traumas and forged something new. Not perfect, never perfect, but real, and honest and worth every battle they'd fought to protect it. And that, Rachel thought as sleep finally claimed her, was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The call came on a Tuesday morning in October, 2.5 years after Daniel had found Rachel's pipe in the trash and chosen not to walk away. Rachel was at Codebridge preparing for an afternoon class when her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. She almost ignored it. Spam calls were constant, but something made her answer. Miss Monroe? This is Detective Sarah Reyes with the LAPD. I'm calling about Marcus Webb. He listed you as an emergency contact. Rachel's mind went blank for a moment before placing the name. Marcus Webb, a student from Codebridge's second cohort, a former gang member trying to turn his life around through technology education. He'd been one of her best students, eventually becoming a volunteer instructor himself, helping teach younger kids from his neighborhood. What happened? Rachel asked, her heart already racing. Is Marcus okay? He's in the hospital. There was an incident in his neighborhood. Wrong place, wrong time. He was shot protecting some kids from crossfire. He's stable, but he's asking for you. Rachel was already grabbing her bag, her hand shaking as she texted Daniel. Emergency. Marcus shot. Going to county hospital. She didn't wait for a response, just drove through midday traffic with her heart in her throat, praying Marcus would still be alive when she arrived. The hospital was the kind of overwhelmed chaos that came with being the primary trauma center for one of America's largest cities. Rachel found Marcus in the ICU, his chest wrapped in bandages, his face gray with pain and blood loss. But he was conscious, and when he saw her, his eyes filled with tears. You came, he whispered. I wasn't sure you would. Rachel pulled a chair beside his bed, taking his hand carefully. Of course I came. What happened, Marcus? Some kids were playing in the street. Gunfire started. I don't even know what it was about, some beef between crews. The kids froze, and I couldn't let them get hit, so I grabbed them and ran. He coughed, wincing at the pain. Took a bullet in the chest, but the kids made it. They're okay. You're a hero, Rachel said, her voice thick with emotion. I'm an idiot who almost died. Marcus tried to smile, but couldn't quite manage it. But I wanted to tell you something before, just in case. You saved my life, Ms. Monroe. Not today, but 2 years ago, when you started Codebridge. I was heading nowhere good. Prison or death, probably both. But you gave me something to care about, a reason to be better than what my neighborhood expected. You did that yourself, Marcus. I just provided the space. No, you saw something in me worth saving when I'd stopped seeing it myself. You taught me skills, yeah, but more than that, you taught me I could be someone different than who I'd always been. His grip tightened on her hand. That lesson saved my life long before this bullet tried to take it. I needed you to know that. Rachel sat with him until he fell asleep, medicated and exhausted, then spoke with his doctors about his prognosis. He'd survive, they said, but recovery would be long and expensive. He had no insurance, no savings, and a family that was struggling just to keep their heads above water. Rachel made some calls before leaving the hospital. By the time she got home that evening, she'd arranged to cover Marcus's medical bills, set up a recovery fund for his family, and started the process of helping him apply for longer-term support services. It wasn't saving him. Marcus had already saved himself by choosing to be better, but it was removing obstacles that might derail the progress he'd fought so hard to achieve. Daniel found her at the kitchen table that night, paperwork spread around her, tears streaming down her face. Maya was already in bed, spared from seeing Rachel's breakdown. "What happened?" Daniel asked, sitting beside her. Rachel told him everything: the shooting, Marcus's words, the crushing weight of realizing how many people were one bad moment away from losing everything they'd built. He could have died today. This kid who's worked so hard to turn his life around could have been killed by random violence that had nothing to do with him. And there are hundreds more just like him in this city, trying to build better lives with no safety net and constant danger, and you can't save them all, Daniel said gently. You know that, right? You can't fix every broken system or prevent every tragedy. But I have to try. I have the resources, the platform, the ability to actually make a difference. How can I not use it? Daniel recognized the edge in her voice, the obsessive quality that could tip from passionate advocacy into self-destructive martyrdom. He'd seen it before, in her tech CEO days when she'd worked herself into addiction trying to solve every problem perfectly. Rachel, listen to me. What you're doing with CodeBridge is incredible. You're changing lives, giving people opportunities they wouldn't have otherwise. But you can't let it consume you the way your company did. You can't sacrifice your health and your recovery trying to save everyone. So I just accept that people like Marcus will keep getting shot? That the systems are broken and there's nothing I can do? No. You accept that you're one person doing the best you can, and that has to be enough. You save the people you can save. You teach the students who come to your classes. You make whatever difference is possible without destroying yourself in the process. He took her hands. Marcus is alive because you gave him skills and hope and a reason to be better. That's huge, Rachel. That matters. Don't diminish it by thinking you should have done more. Rachel leaned into him, exhausted and overwhelmed. I'm scared, Daniel. Scared that if I'm not doing everything possible, I'm wasting the second chance I've been given. I was dying 2 years ago, and someone saved me. Don't I owe it to the universe to pass that forward as much as possible? You're already passing it forward. Every student you teach, every life you touch, that's passing it forward. But you don't owe the universe your destruction. You don't honor your second chance by working yourself into relapse, or burnout, or martyrdom. The words landed hard because Rachel knew he was right. She'd been feeling the old patterns creeping back, working longer hours at CodeBridge, taking on more students than was sustainable, saying yes to every request for help, even when she was already stretched thin. She'd been so focused on proving her life had meaning after addiction that she was risking the very recovery that made everything else possible. I need help, Rachel said quietly. I need to scale back before I crash. I just don't know how to do less when there's so much that needs doing. Then we figure it out together. We set boundaries. We bring in more staff so you're not carrying everything alone. We make sure CodeBridge is sustainable long-term instead of dependent on you burning yourself out. Over the next few weeks, Rachel restructured CodeBridge with Daniel's help. She hired an executive director to handle daily operations, freeing her to focus on teaching, the part she loved most. She established clearer boundaries about her working hours, making sure she was home for family dinners and Maya's bedtime routine. She started saying no to expansion opportunities that would have stretched the organization beyond its capacity. It felt uncomfortable at first, like she was failing by not doing everything. But slowly, Rachel discovered that doing less actually allowed her to do better work. Her teaching improved when she wasn't exhausted. Her relationships deepened when she had energy to invest in them. Her recovery stabilized when she prioritized self-care over constant productivity. Marcus's recovery became a turning point not just for Rachel, but for CodeBridge as a whole. His story, former gang member turned coding instructor who'd taken a bullet protecting kids, attracted media attention that Rachel leveraged to expand funding and support. She used his example to advocate for better resources in underserved communities, speaking at city council meetings and community forums about the connection between opportunity and violence prevention. But she did it sustainably, with boundaries and support systems in place. She brought Marcus into the advocacy work as his health improved, letting him tell his own story rather than speaking for him. She built coalitions with other nonprofits rather than trying to solve everything herself. She learned the difference between passionate commitment and destructive obsession. By the following spring, 3 years after Daniel had found her dying, Rachel had built something that actually felt sustainable. CodeBridge was thriving with multiple locations and a wait list of students. Her marriage was solid, strengthened by their willingness to be honest about struggles instead of pretending everything was fine. Maya was flourishing in second grade, confident and curious, and secure in her family's love. Life wasn't perfect. Rachel still had hard days when the cravings whispered seductively, when self-doubt crept in, when the weight of other people's suffering felt overwhelming. But she'd learned to ride out those moments instead of being destroyed by them. She'd built a support system that could hold her when she faltered and celebrate her when she succeeded. One Saturday morning in May, Rachel woke to find Daniel already awake beside her, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What?" she asked, self-conscious. "I was just thinking about the night I found your pipe. How terrified I was that you'd die before morning, how I had no idea what I was doing, how I almost walked away because getting involved seemed too complicated." "Why were you thinking about that?" "Because 3 years ago today, you dumped your stash in the trash and asked me to help you survive. 3 years clean, Rachel. That's incredible." Rachel felt emotion rise in her throat. 3 years. 1,000 days of choosing sobriety over escape, of fighting through cravings and doubts and moments when using would have been so much easier than staying clean. 3 years of building a life worth staying sober for. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said. "Yes, you could have. You're stronger than you know. I just made sure you weren't alone while you discovered that strength." They spent the day celebrating quietly. Brunch with Maya at her favorite pancake restaurant, a walk through the botanical gardens, an evening at home with no agenda except being together. It wasn't dramatic or Instagram-worthy, just a family, marking a milestone that most people would never understand the significance of. That night, after Maya was asleep, Rachel and Daniel sat on their back porch watching the stars emerge in the city light-washed sky. Rachel held a cup of tea, chamomile, not one of the energy drinks she used to live on, and felt a contentment so complete it was almost frightening. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," she admitted, "for something terrible to happen that destroys all of this. It feels too good to last." That's trauma talking. The belief that happiness is temporary and suffering is inevitable. Daniel took her hand. "But Rachel, you've been happy for 3 years now. At some point, you have to accept that this is your actual life, not some temporary reprieve before disaster strikes. What if I relapse? What if I mess everything up? Then we deal with it, and you try again. Relapse doesn't erase 3 years of sobriety or invalidate everything you've built. It's just a setback, not an ending." He paused. "But I don't think you're going to relapse. I think you've built too much that matters to you, too many connections that keep you tethered to life. The woman who was dying in that penthouse, she wanted to escape. You don't want to escape anymore." Rachel realized he was right. She didn't fantasize about using anymore, didn't romanticize the high or minimize the cost. Using had nearly killed her, had cost her company and her reputation and years of her life. Staying sober had given her everything that actually mattered: Daniel, Maya, code bridge, purpose, connection, joy. The choice wasn't even difficult anymore. "I love my life," she said, the admission feeling profound. "I actually, genuinely love my life. The work I do matters. The people I love are healthy and happy. I'm healthy and happy. When did that happen?" Gradually, then all at once. That's how healing works. You don't notice it accumulating until suddenly you realize you're not broken anymore. The conversation was interrupted by Maya calling from her bedroom. "Mom, can you come here?" Rachel still felt a jolt of joy every time Maya called her mom, without hesitation or qualifier. She went to her stepdaughter's room and found her sitting up in bed, looking worried. "What's wrong, baby?" "I had a scary thought. What if you and Daddy die like my first mom did? What if I lose you too?" Rachel sat on the edge of Maya's bed, her heart aching for the fear this child carried despite their best efforts to make her feel secure. "Come here, sweetheart." Maya crawled into her lap, and Rachel held her close, choosing her words carefully. "I can't promise that nothing bad will ever happen. People get sick, accidents occur, life is unpredictable, but I can promise that your daddy and I are doing everything we can to stay healthy and safe and here for you for a very long time." "But you were sick before, right? Before I met you?" "Daddy said you were sick, and he helped you get better." Rachel looked toward the doorway where Daniel had appeared, leaning against the frame. He nodded slightly, giving her permission to share whatever truth she thought Maya could handle. I was sick, Rachel confirmed. I was making bad choices that were hurting my body and my mind. But your daddy helped me get better, and now I work very hard every day to stay healthy. I go to doctor appointments. I take care of myself. I don't make those bad choices anymore. So you won't die from being sick? Not from that sickness. I'm healthy now, Maya. Strong and healthy, and planning to be around for a very long time to watch you grow up and do amazing things. Maya was quiet for a moment, processing. I'm glad Daddy found you when you were sick. I'm glad you got better. I like having you as my mom. I like being your mom. It's my favorite thing I've ever done. Even more than your computer company? Especially more than my computer company. Because being your mom is real and important in a way that making money never was. Rachel tucked Maya back into bed, sang her the lullaby she'd learned from Daniel, and sat with her until she fell asleep. Then she returned to the porch where Daniel was waiting. She knows, Rachel said, settling back into her chair. Not the details, but she knows I struggled with something serious. Is that okay? Did I say too much? You said exactly the right amount, age-appropriate honesty without trauma dumping on a 7-year-old. Daniel smiled. She deserves to know that her mom is human, that she struggled and survived, that hard things can be overcome. That's a valuable lesson. I never thought I'd be someone's mom. In my using days, I couldn't imagine being responsible for another human when I could barely keep myself alive. Rachel looked at the stars. But she's made me better in ways I never expected. Every time I'm tempted to work too hard or skip self-care or fall into old patterns, I think about her needing me to be healthy and present. She's my accountability in the best possible way. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her, to have both of you. Rachel turned to face Daniel fully. Do you ever regret it? Marrying someone with my history, my complications. You could have found someone easier. I didn't want easier. I wanted you, all of you, including the complicated parts. You've made me a better person, Rachel. You've taught me that love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about choosing to show up for someone's imperfections over and over again. They sat together as the night deepened, talking about everything and nothing. Maya's upcoming science fair project, Codebridge's summer expansion plans, whether they should finally get the dog Maya had been campaigning for. Ordinary conversations about an extraordinary life they'd built from the wreckage of their separate traumas. The following week brought an unexpected visitor to Codebridge. Rachel was teaching an afternoon class on web design when the receptionist interrupted to say someone was asking for her. She stepped out to find Jennifer Chen waiting, the woman from her support group who'd been clean for 5 years, who'd helped Rachel understand that recovery was possible. Jennifer, what are you doing here? I came to ask you something important. Jennifer looked nervous. I'm celebrating 5 years clean next month, and I want to sponsor my first person in the program, someone who's early in recovery and needs guidance. And I was hoping you'd co-sponsor with me, share your experience about maintaining sobriety while building a career and family. Rachel felt honored and terrified in equal measure. I'm only 3 years in. Shouldn't you find someone with more time? 3 years is enough to help someone at 6 months or a year. You have experience they need. You've navigated professional success and devastating failure while staying clean. You've built a family in recovery. You've transformed your relationship with work and purpose. That's valuable knowledge. What if I mess it up? What if I give them bad advice? Jennifer laughed. Then you tell them you messed up and try again. That's recovery. We learn by doing, not by being perfect. Will you do it? Rachel agreed, and over the following months found herself in the unexpected role of mentor to a woman named Andrea, a lawyer who'd lost her practice to addiction and was trying to rebuild her life. Rachel met with her weekly, sharing her story, listening to Andrea's struggles, offering the same kind of steady presence Daniel had given her 3 years ago. It was harder than Rachel expected. Watching Andrea struggle with cravings and self-doubt and fear of failure triggered memories of her own early recovery. But it was also deeply meaningful, this passing forward of the grace she'd been given. When Andrea called her at midnight having a panic attack, Rachel talked her through it with the calm certainty of someone who'd survived those same terrors. When Andrea celebrated 30 days clean, Rachel was there to witness and celebrate. "You're good at this," Daniel observed one night after Rachel had spent an hour on the phone with Andrea. "Helping people through recovery. Have you ever thought about making it more official?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, getting certified as a recovery counselor or peer support specialist. You're already doing the work. Why not get credentials that could help you reach more people?" The idea took root in Rachel's mind. Over the next year, she completed training to become a certified peer recovery specialist, balancing the coursework with her work at Codebridge and her family responsibilities. It wasn't easy. There were days when she felt stretched too thin, when the demands of being a wife, mother, nonprofit director, teacher, and recovery mentor felt overwhelming. But she'd learned to recognize her limits and ask for help before hitting them. Daniel picked up extra household responsibilities. Codebridge's executive director took on more leadership duties. Rachel's support group provided encouragement during the hardest moments of the training. And Maya, with the adaptability of children, adjusted to having a mom who was sometimes stressed but always honest about it. 4 years after Daniel found her dying, Rachel stood in front of a graduating class of peer recovery specialists, delivering a keynote speech about her journey from active addiction to helping others navigate their own recovery. She saw faces in the audience that reflected her own past struggles, people fighting daily battles to stay clean, people learning to build lives worth staying sober for, people discovering that their worst moments didn't have to define their entire story. "Recovery isn't a destination," Rachel told them. "It's a practice, something we do every single day, sometimes every single hour, for the rest of our lives. Some days it's easy, and some days it's brutal. But every day we stay clean is a victory, no matter how small it feels in the moment." She talked about the night Daniel found her pipe and chose to care instead of walking away, about the shame of admitting she needed help, about the physical agony of withdrawal and the emotional work of understanding why she'd used in the first place, about rebuilding a life from scratch and discovering that the person she became in recovery was better than the person she'd been before addiction. "Someone once told me that the worst kind of dying is the kind nobody else can see," Rachel said, her voice thick with emotion. "For 2 years, I was dying in plain sight while everyone congratulated me on my success. It took one person who bothered to look past my facade and see my suffering, to save my life. Not by rescuing me, but by refusing to let me die alone." She saw Daniel in the back of the auditorium, Maya beside him, both watching with pride. Her family, her reason for fighting through every hard moment, every craving, every day when sobriety felt impossible. "We can't save everyone," Rachel concluded, "but we can show up for the people in our lives who are struggling. We can refuse to walk away when things get hard. We can bear witness to their pain without trying to fix it for them. And sometimes that presence, that steady, unglamorous, everyday showing up, makes all the difference between someone dying alone and someone finding the courage to survive." The audience erupted in applause, but Rachel barely heard it. She was looking at Daniel, remembering that first night when he'd stood in her bathroom holding evidence of her secret and chosen compassion over judgment. Everything good in her life, her marriage, her family, her purpose, her sobriety, traced back to that one moment of someone deciding she was worth saving. After the ceremony, they went to dinner as a family at Maya's favorite Italian restaurant. Maya, now 7.5, dominated the conversation with stories about her second-grade adventures and her newest obsession with marine biology. She'd moved past dinosaurs, Daniel explained, and was now fixated on octopuses and their remarkable intelligence. "Did you know octopuses have 3 hearts?" Maya informed them seriously. "And they can change colors to match their surroundings, and they're so smart they can open jars and solve puzzles." "I did not know that," Rachel said, smiling at her daughter's enthusiasm. "Tell me more." As Maya launched into an elaborate explanation of cephalopod biology, Rachel caught Daniel's eye across the table. He was smiling that particular smile he reserved for moments when everything felt exactly right, when the life they'd built together was on full display in all its ordinary, extraordinary beauty. Later that night, after Maya was asleep and they were getting ready for bed, Daniel pulled Rachel close. "I'm proud of you, not just for today, though that speech was incredible. I'm proud of how far you've come, how hard you've worked, how you've transformed your pain into purpose. I couldn't have done any of it without you." We've been through this. Yes, you could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to. He kissed her forehead. 4 years clean. How does it feel? Rachel thought about it carefully. It feels like I've finally figured out how to live instead of just survive. Like I've built something real and sustainable that isn't dependent on external validation or chemical enhancement. Like I'm actually present in my own life instead of watching it happen from a distance. That's beautiful. It's also terrifying sometimes. Being present means feeling everything, the joy, but also the pain, the love, but also the fear of loss. I can't numb myself anymore when things get hard. But you don't want to, Daniel observed. Even when it's painful, you don't actually want to go back to numbness. No, because the pain means I'm alive enough to feel it. And the joy, the real, genuine joy I feel with you and Maya, that's only possible because I'm fully present to experience it. Rachel smiled. Turns out your 5-year-old was right all those years ago. It hurts, but that means you're alive enough to try again. They fell asleep tangled together, two people who'd found each other in their darkest moments and built something luminous from the wreckage. In the next room, Maya slept soundly, secure in a family that had chosen each other deliberately and lovingly. And in the city beyond their home, lives were being changed one coding class at a time, one recovery meeting at a time, one moment of compassionate presence at a time. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of challenges and triumphs. Maya grew into a confident, curious kid who excelled at science and inherited her mother's analytical mind. CodeBridge expanded to serve thousands of students, with Rachel stepping back into a more advisory role as the organization matured. Her work as a recovery specialist deepened, helping dozens of people navigate their own journeys from active addiction to sustainable sobriety. But it was the ordinary moments that Rachel treasured most. Weekend mornings with pancakes and crossword puzzles, family game nights where Maya destroyed them both at strategy games, quiet evenings on the porch watching the sunset. The life she'd built wasn't extraordinary in any external sense. She wasn't on magazine covers anymore, wasn't closing billion-dollar deals, wasn't accumulating wealth and power at a breakneck pace. But she was alive. Genuinely, fully, gratefully alive in ways she'd never been during her years of external success. She was present for her family, engaged in meaningful work, connected to a community that supported her growth. She was exactly who she wanted to be, living exactly the life she wanted to live. 5 years after Daniel found her dying, Rachel stood in her bedroom getting ready for an ordinary Tuesday. Maya was downstairs eating breakfast, and Daniel was packing lunches, and the morning unfolded with comfortable chaos. Rachel caught her reflection in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. Healthy skin, clear eyes, a face that held peace instead of desperation. "You coming?" Daniel called up the stairs. "Maya wants you to help her with her marine biology presentation before school." "Be right there." Rachel took one last look at herself, at the life she'd fought so hard to build and maintain. Then she headed downstairs to help her daughter practice her presentation, to kiss her husband goodbye before he left for work, to live one more day of this precious, hard-won existence. That evening, CodeBridge was hosting a 5-year anniversary celebration. 5 years since Rachel had taken her buyout money and invested it in something that actually mattered. The event was simple: current and former students sharing their success stories, volunteer instructors being recognized, community partners celebrating the impact they'd made together. Marcus was there, now the program director at CodeBridge's newest location, using his story and his skills to help other young people find alternatives to street life. Andrea, the lawyer Rachel had sponsored, celebrated 2 years clean and announced she'd just passed the bar exam to restore her license. Jennifer, Rachel's own sponsor, beamed with pride at the ripple effect of recovery spreading through the community. Rachel stood at the podium to give closing remarks, looking out at the faces of people whose lives had been changed by access to education and opportunity. 5 years ago, I was offered a choice, she began. I could fight to reclaim what had been taken from me, my company, my reputation, my identity as a successful tech executive. Or I could let it go and build something new, something that mattered for reasons that had nothing to do with profit or prestige. She paused, emotion thick in her throat. I chose to let go. And in doing so, I found something I never had during my years of corporate success: purpose. Real, meaningful purpose that's measured not in stock prices, but in lives changed. People who learned skills that led to jobs. Kids who discovered passions they didn't know existed. Communities that gained access to technology that had previously been out of reach. Rachel saw Daniel and Maya in the front row, both watching with love and pride. Her family, her foundation, her reason for fighting through every hard day of recovery. But more than that, I found out who I actually was beneath all the performance and achievement and desperate need for validation. I found out that Rachel Monroe without a tech empire was still someone worth being, someone who could contribute and connect and build something meaningful, someone who deserved to take up space in the world, not because of what she'd accomplished, but simply because she existed. She looked directly at Daniel. Someone once refused to walk away when I was dying. Someone chose to see my suffering instead of my success, to care about my survival instead of my productivity. That choice saved my life. And everything good that's happened since, this organization, these changed lives, my family, my recovery, all of it traces back to one person deciding I was worth showing up for. The audience applauded, but Rachel wasn't finished. So here's what I want you to take from tonight. You don't have to be perfect to deserve help. You don't have to have it all together to be worth someone's time and care. And if you're the person watching someone else struggle, don't walk away. Don't assume they're fine because they look successful. Show up, care. Refuse to let them die alone, literally or figuratively. That choice, that simple, everyday choice to give a damn about another human being, changes everything. After the event, as they drove home through the city streets, Maya fell asleep in the back seat, and Rachel leaned against Daniel's shoulder, exhausted but content. "Good speech," Daniel said quietly. "I meant every word." "I know you did. That's what made it powerful." He glanced at her. "Do you ever regret it? Walking away from your company, choosing this life over that one?" Rachel thought about her old life, the penthouses and private jets, the magazine covers and business accolades, the constant hustle and desperate need to prove her worth through achievement. Then she thought about her current life, the modest house with its lived-in comfort, the nonprofit work that actually changed lives, the family that loved her for who she was rather than what she could do. "Not even once," she said honestly. "That life was killing me. This life saved me. That's all that matters." They carried Maya inside, Rachel tucking her daughter into bed while Daniel cleaned up the kitchen. Then they sat together on their back porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky, holding the kind of comfortable silence that only came from years of showing up for each other through everything. 5 years, Rachel said softly. 5 years since I threw away my drugs and asked you to help me survive. 5 years of choosing life over escape, of building something real, of learning to be present instead of numb. 5 years of being brave enough to keep fighting even when it was hard. I'm not brave. I'm just stubborn and lucky enough to have people who refuse to let me give up. Daniel pulled her closer. You're both. Stubborn and brave and lucky and loved. All of it at once. Rachel rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the warmth of his body, the solid reality of his presence. This man who'd seen her at her absolute worst and chosen to stay. Who'd witnessed her struggle and survival and never once made her feel like a burden. Who'd loved her through addiction and recovery and all the messy, complicated work of building a life worth living. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For not walking away, for showing up every single day, even when I gave you every reason to leave, for believing I could survive when I'd stopped believing it myself. Thank you for surviving, for fighting hard enough to make it to the other side, for building this life with me. Daniel kissed the top of her head. I love you, Rachel, exactly as you are, including all the parts you used to think made you unlovable. They sat together as night settled fully over Los Angeles, two people who'd been dying in different ways and had found each other just in time, who'd chosen honesty over pretense, presence over performance, connection over achievement, who'd learned that survival was something you did together, one day at a time, with people who refused to give up on you even when you'd given up on yourself. Inside, Maya stirred in her sleep and called out softly. Rachel went to check on her, finding her daughter tangled in blankets and half awake. Mom, you're still here, right? This isn't a dream. I'm still here, baby. Always. Promise? Even when I grow up and go to college and become a marine biologist and study octopuses in the ocean? Even then, I'll always be your mom, no matter where you are or how grown up you get. Maya smiled sleepily. Good. Love you, Mom. Love you too, sweetheart, so much. Rachel returned to the porch, to Daniel, to the life they'd built from wreckage and hope and stubborn refusal to give up. She thought about the woman she'd been 5 years ago, dying in a penthouse, isolated and desperate, convinced she was fine even as she destroyed herself. That woman felt like someone else entirely, someone Rachel barely recognized. But she was also still that woman, still capable of falling, still vulnerable to old patterns, still carrying the scars of addiction and trauma. Recovery didn't erase the past. It just taught you to build something stronger in the present, something durable enough to withstand whatever storms came next. What are you thinking? Daniel asked. That I'm grateful for all of it, even the hard parts, even the suffering, because it led me here, to you, to Maya, to this life that feels worth fighting for every single day. Every single day? Every single day. Even the hard ones. Especially the hard ones, because those are when the choice matters most. They sat together in the darkness, watching the city lights shimmer and shift. Two people who'd learned that survival wasn't about never falling down. It was about getting back up, again and again, with people who loved you enough to help you rise. It was about choosing presence over numbness, connection over isolation, life over the slow death of giving up. Rachel Monroe had been dying in her perfect penthouse, drowning in success while everyone applauded. But someone had noticed. Someone had cared enough to refuse to walk away. And that simple choice, to show up, to stay present, to believe she was worth saving, had changed everything. Now, 5 years later, she was finally, completely, gratefully alive. And that was everything that mattered.